All right, what's up, everybody? We are back on a later Friday night because we just moved into our new place. And so it was taking us a little bit of time to get everything set up and ready to go for you guys. But we're ready to talk some Star Wars now. So we got all kinds of things. We're going to be doing the Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 2 review. Of course, John Boyega had a real talk with Disney. We're going to cover that. We're also going to talk about the villains of the High Republic. We've been covering a lot of things about the High Republic, the Jedi, the Padawans. Now we're going to do the villains. And then, of course, we also have Solo 2.
Yeah, man.
Solo 2 could actually happen according to Ron Howard. And we're going to cover it all right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So here we are. We're in our new spot. Now, we're not quite done with it yet, but, we basically just moved into the thing today. Crazy enough.
Yeah, I know, right?
So
it's cool, though.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this place. I want to give a little shout out to Wally at Orange Dragon Productions for giving us the space, renting it out to us and everything. I mean, he's been a good friend for a lot of years, and
yeah, man.
Yeah, it's actually been cool. We've even gotten a few new, we got some new gear, we got some new microphones, and some stuff like that.
Hopefully
so
no echo.
yeah, well, yeah, no echo, no nothing like that. I think that I think this is actually going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
So what do you think not only of the new place, but what do you think of just all the new stuff so far?
Oh, I think it's all good, man. I mean, it's cool. I like the. Even when we say space, not even just the room itself, but just the space between us, it's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more roomy. So I love that. And then, of course, I'm loving the Funko Pops. Yeah, we get to show them some love.
Yeah, you know what? And because in the last space, we really didn't have much of a chance to show those off. Like we did in the beginning, but then, it just sort of like the way we had to arrange everything. And so, yeah, this should actually be pretty good. So, Ron Howard.
Yeah.
Saying Solo 2 could happen.
Yeah, man. We got to talk about this, man.
Yeah.
But first, before we get to that, shout out to Ronaldo.
Yeah. Let's give a shout out to Ronaldo. Was I the only one who said today, Baby Yoda, no, don't do that? We will get to that.
Yeah.
We will definitely, you're not the only one. And I have some definite thoughts about, a little bit about where Baby Yoda's going. But first, we got to talk about Solo 2, and we're doing it right now and from a certain point of view. All right, so we are back in our main topic from a certain point of view. Before I go on I want to give a shout out to my friends in the Facebook group Star Warriors. They were actually really cool. They let me post some of the videos from last week, and not only... Well, I didn't actually do our whole podcast because I thought that would have been obnoxious because it's, like 3 hours long. But when we broke out some of the clips, like the Obi-Wan segment and the Ahsoka segment, those guys were nice enough to, to let me actually post a little bit about that. So I thought that was really, really cool of them.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We really appreciate that.
So, yeah, I mean, if you guys, if you're on Facebook or whatever, in addition to going to our group, which is Head to Head Star Wars Community, check out Star Warriors. Those guys are really cool, and there's a lot of really good Star Wars discussion that happens over there. So this whole Solo 2 thing.
Well, yeah, man. First of all, I know you probably are really excited to hear this since Solo is one of your favorite, all-time Star Wars characters.
But don't forget, though, that I'm mostly like a Harrison Ford kind of guy.
True. And I think, of course, he defined the role,
Yeah.
But, I mean, I did really enjoy the Solo actual standalone.
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think, and both of us thought that it was a really cool, really fun movie. That even though it was a movie that neither one of us necessarily thought needed to be made,
right?
When we actually saw it, we're like, you know what? It does capture Star Wars. It is a really cool movie. And it was, of course, it followed The Last Jedi, which I think is another thing that worked in its favor. I know a lot of people actually said that worked against it. And from a box office perspective, that could be. But I think it was actually more the lack of marketing and things like that. Because honestly, the whole tone of the film, I thought actually was a good swing back from The Last Jedi.
It was, and especially with the last film, how it ended. I think the ending was beautiful because none of us expected that to happen. We never thought that we would see like Darth Maul at the end of this thing, and then it's like, oh, whoa, okay, I can see how they're making certain connections here on some stuff. So I really thought that was really cool.
No, you got a point actually, because the whole Darth Maul thing was just spectacular. But apparently, so what happened? Like Ron Howard was interviewed or something like that, and then he just all of a sudden came out and said, well, nothing's actually, I haven't been approached, and nothing is actually, I think he wanted to clarify, like, look, guys, nothing is actually moving now, but it could happen.
Well, for a while there was actually a campaign, we covered it a few months ago, where a lot of fans were actually clamoring for Solo 2, which was fun because it was the first one was a box office flop by box office standards. However, excuse me. However, though, it still really, resonated well with fans. Like, as fans got a chance to see it and digest it, especially when they got on, like, at first it started off on Netflix, and then now it's on Disney Plus. And so now once fans have really got a chance to really, like, get into it, they're like, man, this is really good. I want to see more. And, Alden Ehrenreich did an excellent job, in my opinion, is, capturing, Harrison Ford's portrayal of Han Solo. But, to the report, pretty much he addressed it, and he pretty much said, well, there's no sequel planned now. It's amazing to be a part of the Star Wars movie that seems to be kind of an underground hit, which is not what you expect. But that's been an odd, strange journey for that movie. So the fact that it's not in the works right now, but I think, the more the fans are kind of pushing for it, I think you could tell some more story, at least one more story out of it. You could kind of see, okay, well, how did Lando, acquire Cloud City or something like that?
Yeah, I was going to say, what stories do you think that they could actually tell from it then?
Yeah, I mean, I could see like some adventures with that, I could see, of course, once again, Han just now newly acquiring the Millennium Falcon, which is pretty much like the iconic thing. And so, of course, we know about the Kessel Run already. But now, you can kind of see different adventures, especially with him being a smuggler. I mean, it's almost like the Mandalorian. You can tell a lot of stories just being in that profession, before he actually runs into, Obi-Wan and Luke in episode 4. There's tons of stuff that he's actually done, and that gives him more depth. I know he's looking for, what's her name? Kira?
Yeah, Kira.
Yeah. So, there's that aspect too. So you can kind of see, okay, where is he at in that, whole adventure? So I think you can tell some stories out of it. And of course you can also show the blossoming friendship of he and Chewie, so then there's that aspect too. So
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I thought that not only was that ending spectacular, but it really did open, it blew the door wide open for future stories, because now, you got Darth Maul as the head of Crimson Dawn, and there's a whole different, direction that you could basically go there. Like you said, the whole idea of Kira's a part of this thing, she sort of got sucked into it, and she wasn't really looking to be into it, and she's, it's almost like that Padme Anakin thing, where Padme could see that as much as she loved Anakin, they were growing apart because they were going basically in different directions, and their beliefs were a little bit at odds with each other. And I think that was kind of happening with Kira and Han too, is that, Kira really wanted to just run away and have a life with him, but that wasn't, she was kind of like trapped in this organization. And then of course Han is trying to essentially find himself, figure out what he wants to do. And I think that there's just a lot of room for, just all kinds of different stories that they could get out of that. I mean, honestly, I almost think that Solo would be a better Disney Plus series than if you actually just made like a Solo 2 movie. Because like you were saying with Lando and all this stuff, there are so many different directions that you can go with this.
Yeah, you also can't forget, the almost kind of father-son relationship that he had with Jabba too. You need to kind of show, okay, so when now it gives more context to when Jabba pops up in 4, and he's just like, "Hi, my Buki," and it's funny because you hear him say that, and he's kind of like, if it was anybody else, I would have had you, but it's you. You're kind of my best guy. I really don't want to do this to you, but I have a reputation to maintain out here. So, yeah, I mean, I get you have a lot of a lot of that you can really kind of get into, especially, and I think that's where you would start. He's probably like, okay, I need some consistent work. All right, let me get with this Jabba the Hutt guy, and then I do some stuff where he pays well, and then because I think they kind of alluded to that actually at the end of Solo, if I'm not mistaken, where he was saying like something about Tatooine.
Yeah,
then,
it was Krayt or what was Woody Harrelson's character's name? Something like that.
Yeah,
I keep,
yeah, I forgot
not
his name.
Taggart or something. It was something along those lines.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
he was kind of like that father figure
at
first.
yeah,
It was almost like what was interesting is that, like you brought up, I mean, what you saw with Jabba
mm-hmm.
was pretty much kind of like what Harrelson's character was at first. So there was always this father figure that Han had, and that was something that you really didn't see, because remember, that whole scene that you're talking about with Jabba, that was in the deleted scenes at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course they finished it, and now it's part of this special edition. But there's so much more that you could do, I think, with Han Solo's character. And so if you go back around the time that, Solo happened.
Beckett, that was his name.
Beckett, that was it. I knew it was something.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yep.
But it was really interesting to me, and that's why I always never really get when Harrison Ford is always talking about, oh, there's nothing really more you could do with him. He's like a one-dimensional character. And I mean, when you listen to Harrison talk about it, from an actor's perspective, at least what he's presented with,
Mm-hmm.
I could sort of understand his argument.
Right.
But at the same time, I have to disagree, because if you really look at where he's coming from, and this is even before Solo, I mean, I'm talking about just if you had the original trilogy, like even before the sequel trilogy, before his appearance in The Force Awakens, and you just had a guy that he was a smuggler, he was thinking about himself, he was, as Django said, making his way in the universe, and suddenly he's confronted with a moral dilemma. Do I do the right thing and help these people, or do I just continue to do my own thing because it's not really my problem?
Well, that's why I thought it was so, it was so cool and kind of, I guess, in a way, I guess it was kind of like a callback, if you will, because if you look at like in the sequel trilogy, that's exactly the same thing Finn was going through.
Well, yeah, that I have no doubt in my mind that they pretty much lifted the Finn story from Han Solo, because if you actually remember originally Han Solo was a former Imperial officer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess they kept along with that.
He was an Imperial pilot. Yeah.
He was an Imperial. Yeah, that was it. He was an Imperial pilot. Where in the
Right.
movie they kind of changed it to like an infantry kind of thing, but yeah, he was supposed to be an Imperial pilot or whatever, and then he defected and all that stuff. So there was a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when they did the whole thing with Finn and like, okay, he was a former stormtrooper, it was essentially the same template, which of course falls into that whole thing where everybody's, knocking The Force Awakens because it's derivative. It's like, oh, dude, you're even making this guy the Han Solo. But in a way, there are some differences. And the thing that I really liked is that Poe was really more the Han Solo acting character.
Right.
But it's kind of like you said, if you really look at it, Finn is the one that had his backstory.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like you kind of start to understand like where, and I think like with Solo, you look at towards the end of the film, okay, he loses like his kind of his mentor, his father figure.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually kind of like, in a way, I kind of liken Han Solo to James Bond. Because if you really look at like James Bond's story, he kind of formed attachments with people, and then those people kind of let him down or hurt him, and especially women. And so then now he's kind of at that point where he's kind of doing his own thing, and you can tell that Solo is kind of that love him and leave him ladies man scoundrel kind of guy. Like, all right, I'm gonna just do what I need to do to get what I need, and then I'm out of here. And that's kind of like how James Bond's character is. He's like, I really don't get close to people.
I would
and I
almost
think
characterize Lando to be more James Bondish than Han, though.
James. Well, I mean, if you're looking at like smooth, yeah, but I think like if you really look at the character, especially the one that's been depicted by Daniel Craig, when you start going into the backstory of it.
Well, yeah, all right, I'll give you that.
Yeah, Han Solo kind of more or less matches that because he's had guys or people that came into his life, and he's kind of just trying to find his whole way, and he's found this life that he found something he's good at, smuggling. Just like James Bond kind of found, like, all right, the whole killing thing as far as being an agent. And then it's like he really is kind of reluctant to form attachments, with people, especially like after Kira, because, that was like his world at one point. Mm-hmm. Just like Vesper Lynd was James's, at one point. And so then now you see that loss, and now he's kind of, all right, well, what am I going to do now? And so now he found himself being a smuggler. And then it isn't until he meets, like, of course, Obi-Wan, Luke, Leia, till he's like, okay.
Well, it definitely opens up his
it opens
his
him up
worldview, I guess, his
exactly.
universe a little bit, yeah.
And that's where he's kind of like, okay, well, maybe I don't have to be as selfish, or I know, and because he's been in the Empire, he kind of knows what they're about, and he knows what they're up against, and that's why he's like, attacking this thing isn't the idea of heroism. It's more like suicide,
Right.
Man, he's constantly running from that call, but then he kind of finds himself, well, I just can't leave him. Just like Finn didn't want to just leave Rey. Like he could have just left, wherever Maz Kanata was after they, and just bounced. But why was he so attached to Rey? I mean, aside from the fact that he was attracted to her, but I mean, other than that.
I think we know why he was attached. He wanted to be attached to Rey.
It was the white outfit.
Again,
the white pants.
That's the thing. That's the key to the whole thing. But you know what? This is a discussion-oriented show. Yes. And one of the things that we like to do to separate our show from other shows that you see on YouTube is we like to bring our audience in, and we, and actually have this be like a chat-based discussion. So Ronaldo's got a couple of points here. First, he says, I'd like to see Solo 2, but I really don't think it will happen. And I think the fact that it was the first Star Wars movie in history that flopped was a very hard blow. Very true. Goes on to say, I think Lucasfilm will continue the story, but not as a movie, but as a series. And then finally, and I think it will not continue with Han, but with Lando, Kira, or Maul. All right, so there's a lot to digest in that, in everything that he said. So, first of all, I was pretty much on board with that too. I was thinking like, okay, I think Solo's done. There was definitely a point, and then of course you got that whole, make Solo 2 happen, and it's like, well, all right, well maybe it's not done, right? But then it kind of goes away again, and then they flirt with ideas like, well, maybe we'll make it a Disney Plus series, maybe we'll do this, but it for the most part it goes away, and now you got the guy who directed the film, well, the second one,
yeah.
Third one, if you count Lord and Miller, is like two different people. But you get Ron Howard, who essentially, and he's got a lot of weight with those guys.
Sure,
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think like we've always said, everything has to be, story driven. So if there's no story that's really truly compelling, then you have to leave it alone. Especially with something like I said, once again, when you're dealing with the iconic characters, when you're talking about Han, Luke, Leia, Yoda, Anakin, Obi-Wan, those are like those characters that you really have to be careful with because they're held in such high esteem, and then their stories are such fixtures, and they're kind of pretty much, in most ways, they are the Star Wars universe. So if you screw with them, you make sure you're doing the right.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, by the way, if you guys see me like coughing or going, I'm getting over this like really crazy cold that I've had all week. In fact, I wasn't even sure we'd even have a show because I was feeling really, really rough even a couple of days ago. You could probably tell I'm a little stuffed up, but
it's not COVID, so I checked.
Not COVID. I actually had to get a test though, like this past Monday, which is crazy. It's like my fourth one, but just keep that in mind if you see me suddenly like cough. I'm not dying over here. I just getting over this cold. But yeah, I think that it's important to know that there is more than just a movie that could be made from this thing. I mean, like we said, there's so many different stories they could tell. There's so many different directions they could go in. I don't think that it has to, as Ronaldo pointed out, the story is fine. It's just maybe it wouldn't continue as another movie. And I could see it not being a movie only because of the fact that you got to release it. It's going to be that thing that you have to isolate in your schedule, because if you do that, that's going to be your thing for whatever that cycle is. And it may not be a strong enough thing to bring people in.
Well, yeah, and I think like the problem with Solo is that because it was the first one wasn't marketed well, although a lot of people did eventually kind of catch up to it and start watching it and eventually liked it. But I still don't think by and large it's one of those things where a lot of people will just be clamoring, because if you see Solo 2, they'll be like, "Wait, there's a Solo 1,
Well, but you do bring up a good point, though, is that I think a Solo 2 would probably do better than the original one did, because like you said, a lot of people discovered it on Netflix and
Disney.
Now Disney Plus. So I think that, first of all, the people that did see it enjoyed it. They're kind of like, well, it wasn't necessary, and they were still hurting a little bit from The Last Jedi. But yes, without question, I think there's more of an audience for a Solo 2 than there was for the original one.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that you really have to then now market that, and it's more, like I said, it's time where a lot of fans, I believe, are looking for something fresh and new right now. And with the advent of The Mandalorian being out, that's a fresh and new thing, and people are loving it. And I think that's kind of where people are going with the fans, as far as the fan base is. Everybody wants to see something new.
Well, and before we get to Ronaldo's latest comment here, just to interject this point too, and it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm really not, is that because of the whole COVID thing and, movie theaters are just opening, it's like, I think people would go to see just about anything right now. You put a new Star Wars film out there.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I agree with you, but
I mean, again, it would have to be a little further, because here's the thing that's interesting. They've opened movie theaters back up, and they've got the whole social distancing thing, but that's if you try to release a blockbuster right now, it would almost be suicide, because you can't fill the theaters. Yeah, you can't capitalize on it. That's why they've held back Black Widow still, the Bond movie,
Top Gun.
Yep. All that stuff is still being pushed back, and there's some stuff that's even being pushed back now to 2022. So, I think people just want to err on the side of caution. But Ronaldo says, earlier this year, I would have said it's impossible. With things like the Snyder Cut happening, anything is possible. And yes, it's a very good point, because who actually thought, first of all, people were even debating on whether or not the Snyder Cut even existed.
Mm-hmm.
Then once it was like, it exists or whatever, it was like, there's no way we're going to see the light of day. I mean, this is actually so big. It would be, if we put this in the Star Wars universe, it would be if like Lucasfilm said, hey, guess what? We're making Duel of the Fates.
Right.
Or, well, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, because that's a completely different movie. But that like, Lucas cut?
Yeah, like the Lucas version.
The Lucas version of Rise of Skywalker?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be like what that would be like.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, like I said, I think Solo, like I said, I enjoyed the movie. Would I want to see a continuation of it? Sure. I just don't think it should go into a movie, because I feel like if we're going to make movies, like, we're already kind of like, we got the High Republic, we've got Mandalorian, we're already starting to move into a new direction. To stop that momentum almost and go back to a Han Solo thing, I think it just will kind of,
well, now I definitely agree
derail some of the progression.
Yeah, when you're introducing something like the High Republic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people really want to see. They want to see, and that's the thing. Like after Rise of Skywalker, everybody wanted to see something new from Star Wars that felt like Star Wars, that told brand new stories that you really. Because I mean, honestly, like if you never included Luke, Leia, into the or Han into the sequel trilogy, if you just left them out of it, and then you just gave us Rey, and you left out Palpatine, I think people would have been fine with it.
Yeah.
But because you have these iconic characters now that
Well, but that's an interesting.
kind of, you know,
That's actually a really interesting point, though, because on one hand, the first thing that everybody thought of, including us, if you remember, was like, sweet, we're gonna get to see the further adventures of Han, Luke, and Leia, and that's what we wanted.
Right, well, that's what we wanted.
I mean, you're right. Ultimately, that if you removed all the original characters and just made it about the new ones, kept the stories intact, I think people would have even forgiven a lot of issues because, number one, like, think about The Last Jedi. The biggest problem that people had with it was Luke's portrayal.
Right.
You know, is what they did with Luke. There was the Canto Bite scene, and there was a lot of scenes in there that a lot of people, including us, didn't like. But, I mean, overall, we really liked the movie. A lot of people could not handle what they did with the character of Luke, and that's why everybody soured on it.
Well, not just Luke, but even Leia in that, too, because there was some stuff with Leia that people weren't really too keen on.
Well, yeah, there was a Mary Poppins Force use.
But I think, and I guess what I'm saying is that with the sequel trilogy, I think that if you would have, and I almost do it with what you were saying as far as what's the book? That pretty much we could have taken those characters, not Luke, but Rey, Finn, Poe.
Oh, you're talking about the Timothy Zahn thing, Heir to the Empire.
Heir to the Empire, yeah.
Like, yeah, if you had just swapped out, like if you had used that story but actually just swapped it out for Finn, Poe, and Rey.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that would have been, I think fans would have been like, okay with it. One, it was a good story anyway.
Right.
But I think, two, it's one of those things where whenever you bring the iconic characters in it, once again, it's like there's a expectation that's there. And when you don't live up to that expectation, now you have, and it's funny, like Luke even said it in Rise of Skywalker. What did you want me to do? March down there with the laser sword and take down a whole... And everybody was like, yes, that's exactly what we want to see.
Pretty much like the fan bases. Yeah, that to me, that
and it's
line,
funny, it's funny because it's like that's what everybody was expecting.
That line was almost to me like, is that Lucasfilm communicating with us
right
through Luke? Because that one hit a little close to home for me. I mean, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, actually, that is what we wanted. But again, I actually didn't have a problem with Luke's characterization. That was one of the things. I mean, I thought maybe it shouldn't have gone on as long. And maybe like you put him through all this stuff. And again, there's people that would have said, oh, well, now you're just rushing him through this thing or something. Like what I thought should have happened is that maybe make Luke the way he was in The Last Jedi. And then by the Rise of Skywalker, he kind of turns around, becomes that hero that everybody wanted to see again. And then maybe he does some self-sacrificing Obi-Wan kind of thing at the end.
Right.
To save Rey or whatever.
Right.
And that, to me, would have probably been a better way of handling the whole thing instead of the way they did it, because I think that the way they did it just, it was so anticlimactic, and it didn't satisfy. I mean, you wait all this time, and it's like you get... something that, don't get me wrong, I think it's actually a more realistic depiction of what Luke would actually be like. But, I don't know. I just think that that's one of those things. And then when you flip it back to the Solo issue, I think you're right in the sense of, okay, they're going backwards. It's like in case of emergency, break glass kind of thing, get out the original characters.
Just like we felt about Vader. Like, okay, we don't need to shoehorn Vader into everything.
Well, yeah, you definitely don't need to shoehorn Vader into everything. And then, of course, the other thing that you got to look at, too, and this is something that, to me, is epically important, is that you have to be careful not to keep trying to draw from the original characters, even in future. Like, for instance, I was just reading this article today that Lucasfilm is trying to get Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford back to do some more Star Wars stuff. Now, again, I have some mixed feelings about that. On one hand, of course, that excites me. And I think that there are some canon things that they could do to like fill in gaps and
like,
utilize them.
But that 30 years between Return of the Jedi,
Sure, that's one
that's
prime
the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. They could. I wouldn't really want to see it in the Mandalorian, but they could almost do something like that. They could do animated stuff, like have them do voice work for characters and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, though, it goes to that point that you're making. Like, man, I mean, how many times are we going to keep going back to these guys? Now, for me, the way that I stand on it was I almost wanted Disney to do pretty much in line with what the old expanded universe was. Give me the furthering adventures of Han, Luke, and Leia. You establish these characters in the original trilogy. Now, let me see. This is one of the reasons why I sometimes get a little bit away from the argument that a lot of people are making about move beyond these people, move beyond the past and all that. It's like, look, you got them for like 3 movies and one little adventure. Now, granted, you can make the argument, and many people do, that the idea is like, okay, well, that's these guys. Now let's follow a different set of people because the Star Wars universe is huge. But at the same time, you create these really compelling characters that everybody loves. That's why the expanded universe sold, is because it was the continuing adventures. And then you're bringing new characters in. You had Talon Card. You had Mara Jade. You had, just a bunch of, Kip Duran. You had all these guys that, and then, of course, eventually Jason and Jaina Solo and so on and so forth. You basically had all these characters that were new, but you were bringing them into the world where Han, Luke, and Leia lived.
Right.
And being that they were the prominent, they were pretty much the heads of the New Republic, so it made sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's the problem when, looking back on it, it's kind of hard to focus on, and I think that was the thing. It's kind of hard to focus on the new characters as much because you're still hoping to see Han, Luke, and Leia do something.
Well, sure. Look at The Mandalorian. The first question everybody has is, ooh, I wonder if we're going to get this cameo or that cameo.
Yeah, because, they're around,
Right.
And that's the thing is, when you have those characters, especially sharing screen time, it's kind of hard to really, because you're essentially telling like 2 stories almost like at the same time, because you have to tell the story of the advancement of these new characters, but you still have to figure out what was going on with the old ones.
Right.
So it's like, Luke not Luke, but Han and Leia had a kid, ended up being Kylo. Okay, but they lost him to Snoke. First thing we want to know was, well, how did that happen? And we want to see what that was like. And Luke was training him. We want to see him training the Kylo now. It's like we're so focused on those people because that's who we know, versus the new ones. It's like, okay, we get this is what was happening, but for us as the fans, because we want to see Luke ignite the green, as it were, or we want to see Han
like behind me.
Yep, like we want to see Han.
I ignited the green.
Yes, you did. We want to see Han, flying the Falcon and, doing all the crazy, tricks that he does in the Falcon. Those are the things that we want to see. We don't want to see Rey behind in the cockpit. We don't care. It's
well, but
that's
you do bring up a good point, though, in the sense of the fact that whenever they introduce something, unlike a lot of franchises, it's like we want to see every moment of these characters.
Yeah.
Because even when you take Kylo and Snoke, now they're new characters,
mm-hmm.
but it's like, okay, Snoke ends up turning Kylo from, the light to the dark. Well, we want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not even having anything to do with Luke and all those guys. It's like, okay, these are 2 new characters, but we want to see how that happened. Right. Star Wars is one of those really weird franchises where fans want to see like everything.
Well, it's because it's weird because it's funny because when you look at the original trilogy, right? So when we get the original trilogy, whether when you saw it in 77 or when I hit play on my VCR like at 90 something, I didn't know who Darth Vader was. I didn't know how he became this guy in a helmet with a cape. I didn't know. I just knew like, okay, he walked up. That's the bad guy. That was it. But because of the Star Wars franchise and being what it like, once you get through it, then of course they had a whole prequel that kind of told you that story.
Yeah, but here's the
So
thing.
it's like we kind of forget that.
Well, in a
we
way,
didn't know initially who these people were.
No, you're right. And you can make the argument about the Emperor, too. Like, they kept saying, well, the Emperor's dissolved it. And you're like, well, who's that?
Right.
But here's the thing that you have to look at, though, that I think that it somewhat goes to your point, but in some ways it sort of contradicts it in a way, because I think the opening crawl does make us feel that way, though. Like, again, you want to see. The whole opening crawl of A New Hope, for instance, talked about, okay, these rebels went in, stole the Death Star plans. Oh, we want to see that. And that's the reason why Rogue One did so well, is because we finally got to essentially see a movie that was based on the opening crawl of A New Hope.
True, but I mean, like, we didn't care so much at least. Well, I'm just saying, like,
yes and no. I mean, I would agree with you in the sense of we didn't care in the same way we probably care now.
Yeah, I mean,
it's more of like a rabid, like, oh, I've got to know. You're looking up every, reference and, trying to find. I mean, that's the whole reason why these Star Wars fans, like the Wikipedia and, even StarWars.com and their data bank and stuff like that, because, you see like Snaggletooth and there's like paragraphs on him. And he's like some guy that was just in the cantina in like a 2-minute scene.
Right. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, when you're looking at the main characters, though, like Darth Vader, when we look at, okay, we didn't care about, okay, I'll put it to you this way. Like, at least for me, maybe I'll just speak for myself. When I watched A New Hope and, all right, Obi-Wan is telling Luke the story. A young pupil of mine named Anakin, Skywalker betrayed and murdered or a young pupil of mine named Darth Vader betrayed and murdered your father. And so I'm like, okay, I got my explanation there. And then, of course, later on, you find out in Empire that, of course, even though that wasn't originally the case, that was actually the truth.
From a certain point of view, which is the segment we're in, so it fits.
Right. But I mean, it was originally true. Like, Lucas actually had it as.
Well, yeah.
That's what I mean by that.
It was scripted.
It was originally scripted that was the case.
Right.
It is only changed by Empire because it added more of drama to it, which I agree that's the best thing they could have ever done, and as far as cinema history. But now it's like, all right, but then he's like, no, I'm your father. So then it's like, oh, so wait, so now who's this Anakin guy then? So are you Anakin? And and then so when they explained it, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like when now we get to the Obi-Wan scene of.
Well, okay, I mean, I get it, but I
didn't
remember.
But at that time, when we found out the New Hope,
and I did, because we were watching. After when we would come home, we're sitting there like, we were trying to find out. Well, this big battle between Obi-Wan and Vader, which of course we ended up finally getting in Revenge of the Sith. But we were speculating on that pretty much upon coming home from the theater in A New Hope, because we're like, you see the duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader at that point in their lives, but we knew that.
But we didn't know they battled, though.
Yeah, we did.
Well, we did. Well, once
it was a thing that Lucas put in there. Like, he kind of, when he was doing a bunch of interviews and stuff, he would give stuff, and then there was like some concept art that he released that showed them.
Okay.
Because the idea was, this is why everybody got excited from my generation about Revenge of the Sith, because the idea was that they were fighting on some sort of mountain, and then Vader fell into the lava. I mean, it was almost like a Joker Batman kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he became disfigured, and that's why he had to wear the suit.
Okay.
And for like decades, we wanted to see this.
That makes perfect sense, because like, and I guess that's why I eventually had to like change just for me, because I wasn't there. So for me, it was just like, okay, you hear the story and you're just like, oh, okay. But yeah, if you're growing up in a time when it actually came out and there's all this information that's coming out to you about it, then yeah, I can understand why. And this information that everybody didn't know.
And it came from, because, these were key points. Like, if you really stop and think, just purely, like taking A New Hope by itself,
mm-hmm.
and keep in mind that during its initial run, it wasn't even called A New Hope. It was just called Star Wars. I mean, it wasn't even like the whole Episode 4 thing. But especially I think when it became episode 4 in New Hope. Now you're starting to go, wait a second, what happened to 1 through 3? And then, I thought I was having a little stroke at 7 years old or something because, I remember going to my dad because, we saw it like 2 or 3 times in the theater. And I'm like, I don't remember this being called episode 4, when I first saw it. Or probably the first 2 or 3 times I saw it. Because it was actually, I think, the following year. I think it was like 78 when they put it back in theaters, and then, they added that episode 4. And I'm like, I don't remember that ever being a thing. But I do think that it was one of those things, though, that did spawn a lot of discussion, just like, we were thinking in terms of like, oh, man, I wonder if Luke's going to go up against him. And, of course, we get that in Empire Strikes Back. We get a little bit more with the Emperor. And then the Emperor's finally explained more fully, at least in Return of the Jedi. You get to see a little bit of that dynamic because that was another thing we were thinking about. All right, Ronaldo.
Yeah, Ronaldo says, that's why I think it's best that they don't focus on I think it's best that they do focus on the High Republic so they don't have to worry about the legacy characters except for Yoda. They can do whatever they want with new characters. Exactly. Yeah, and that's my thing is because...
Well, they are painting themselves into a... They're going to almost do in the books, if they're not, or the movies, like what they did in the old expanded universe, if they're not careful. They're going to get into a situation where they start painting themselves into corners. I mean, Lucas was kind of doing that anyway. I mean, look, that's why Luke and Leia, their whole kiss or whatever, it's like, well, all right, now she's your sister, so you have to just kind of forget about that. Because he was changing his mind as he went along, as you do when you're a writer. But I do agree that it's weird because I'm sort of like in both camps. On one hand, I'm very excited about the New Republic because, yes, it's a brand new playground that they can do pretty much within reason. You got to be careful about the whole you can do whatever you want thing because you can and you can't. It's far enough back that you could do some things because you can always just point to the fact that like, oh, well, things changed by the time we get to the Phantom Menace. But at the same time, you can't change things too dramatically in order for there to be, you don't want to eliminate the path, in other words. Like you make things so weird and convoluted that it's like, it's hard for you to imagine how things got to the point that they did in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, you still have certain lore that I guess, you have to kind of maintain and keep intact. But then, like I said, there's also some things though, like, like we often said though, like, you can explain and expose a lot more too, or just add to what's already been laid out for you.
Yeah.
So, that's what we're probably going to get from the High Republic is just more like explanation or how did these rules come to be, such as, all right, no attachments or,
Well, I can't wait till the first book because
and that's
you got to wonder what they're, it's going to be like, is it going to be like, okay, here's all the explanations for everything that, I'm sure they're going to work some of that stuff in.
Oh, they might not give it to us at all.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. I'm actually starting to lean that way. I'm just thinking they're just going to tell a bunch of really cool stories because it's almost like you would, in one hand, you do sort of want to do that. Like you want to give a little bit more backstory to why some of this stuff came into play. And again, you could tell great stories on that.
Right.
Especially where Yoda's concerned.
Yeah, one of the things I really would love to see, and I would love to see it in some form of live action, whether it's a series or movie, but I would love to see the Jedi Trials.
Yeah, you mean depicted a little bit better than the Clone Wars?
Better than the Clone, because, it was hit and miss, really. Like, actually, reading it in Master and Apprentice was really, really, like, that's really what really got me like, man, I want to see this because... you got, it's so much stuff that you have to do, and it's like, you kind of saw Luke going through it in Empire, Yoda was on his back and that was kind of like, all right, it's going to test you physically, mentally, emotionally, you got all these different tests that you kind of have to pass. So you kind of got a glimpse of that in Empire. And then of course in the Clone Wars, you kind of took you through some things like, of course, finding your crystal and, building your lightsaber. So I thought that was cool. But I mean, like, just in its totality, like, I would love to see like the beginning of a Padawan, like pretty much going into a knight and just pretty much like, all right, this is where your journey starts. Pretty much we pick up from there and then
Dear future knight.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Well, I mean, it fit, right?
Yeah, it
but
does.
I mean, the thing is, we're referencing a documentary that we did for
A school,
the school where we used to work. But yeah, it's one of those things, though, that you have to be somewhat careful about that because on one hand, it would be cool if it was organically just part of the story.
Yeah.
Because part of me thinks that some of these things would be better left to just imagination. Like, they don't necessarily have to go into a whole expository explanation of, like, the Jedi Trials is a good example of that because it's something that a lot of us are familiar with. And, we basically kind of know what's involved. And they've given us glimpses, at least in the animated series. But it's not something we have too many details about. And sometimes I think from a storytelling perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not to say I wouldn't want to see it.
Well, I think it would be a great story, especially for since Star Wars primarily is for kids, in and of itself. I think that would be cool for like, especially like the young teens, because that's pretty much when you start going through those trials of life and you start going through your emotional stuff. And I think that would be a great thing to see for just, adults can kind of relate to, like, yeah, I remember was going through those times too. And then of course, if you got kids who are around that age, they can kind of see like, these are the struggles, like even in the galaxy, these people still have these types of struggles where do I fit in the universe? Am I as strong as I should be?
Well,
Why
okay,
can't
the whole
I do
moral of
this?
the story thing, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what Star Wars that's kind of part of the whole thing.
That's
and
part of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can also do it in somewhat of a vague, like if you do it through the story, not necessarily through the event.
Well, that's what I said. I think something like that, if we were going to focus on the Jedi Trials, it would be better done as a series.
Oh yeah, but and then of course, are you talking about like a series called the Jedi Trials, or
it could be, Jedi. It could be called Jedi Trials, or it could be because
I'm getting like Saved by the Bell Jedi, like Bayside High, but it's really Bayside Temple.
Bayside Temple.
I mean, it's well.
Yeah,
honestly,
I
if
like
you think about it. It's kind of like that, though.
Well, I probably would. Honestly, I would probably kind of liken it to, and this would be cool. Honestly, almost like the Game of Thrones type thing, because you kind of have like people who are like, all right, this is kind of like your path that you're on and your destiny that you, like, almost like Arya Stark. We saw her development from like this little girl until by the time that the end of the series, like she's this total butt kicker. But you see her growth and development from like this.
But you can make the same argument with Ahsoka.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's exactly. But the thing is, and Ahsoka, you kind of got that pretty much through the Clone Wars because she got attached to a Jedi Master. But I think if it's done in the traditional way. Like, she didn't go through the traditional Jedi trials.
Well, right. I mean, there's still a little bit of a, yeah.
I mean, you still had it, but she didn't go through, like, like, if you look at, she was kind of more like a co-op, if you will. She was more like that, work-study program or something like that. Like, all right, just stick close and you kind of pick it up as you go. Whereas, in the traditional Jedi trials, it's a little bit more like, okay, you're learning how to do certain things. You're learning how to just pick up objects and do all that stuff. And then the master, comes in and selects you. And then, you're bonded that way. And
it's like you said, basically the way that they depicted it in Master and Apprentice or even Jedi Lost.
I was about to say Jedi Lost was another good one too.
There was a lot involved in that. And that's actually what you're talking about. Because that was when Yoda ended up selecting Dooku and he was like, no way, I mean, that's... So that kind of thing, yes, like a series based on that, where maybe you follow a group of Jedi,
Padawans, basically.
Well, I mean, and they're almost not even Padawans yet, but I guess you could start them there.
They're at the end of it, like the end of the Padawan stage.
Right, but I mean, you can maybe get them So it's like when Saved by the Bell used to be called Goodnight Miss Bliss, right? When they're in elementary school, you're kind of introduced to and a few of those characters. Then they went to Bayside High, right? And then you're following. Then they did the college years, and then they had a little, some specials afterward. I mean, you could almost. It sounds kind of cheesy, but you could almost do something. I'm not necessarily saying in the same tone,
Right.
but you could do something that follows a group of kids, basically, and they're going through this journey together.
And that's why I kind of feel like we're getting into High Republic.
Yeah, it does.
It gives me
Definitely
that,
feel.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I was thinking about Game of Thrones and that whole, because I'm just thinking High Republic. I can see things kind of happening in that realm where, Yoda loves being a teacher. So he usually likes teaching the young ones, like little kids. So that's kind of his thing. And then, you kind of have some of these other masters as I was reading like the last couple of weeks, these masters kind of have all these different kind of styles. Some's a little bit more stern, others a little bit more lackadaisical or laid back, and some are a little bit kind of in between. And so you really kind of start to see like, okay, the personalities come out of these different characters. And it's even cool, just like I said, reading and watching Obi-Wan deal with Qui-Gon, because Qui-Gon was such a rebel, but then Obi-Wan was such by the book kind of guy, and they often clashed in that regard. But then Qui-Gon's like, well, Dooku was really stern, but then, so it's kind of like you're seeing how it's almost kind of like a father, like, okay, or a kid and his father, like, all right, my father raised me this way. I know he meant well and it was good, but I don't want to do that. If I ever had a kid, I would probably do something different. And you really get to see that parallel with Dooku training Qui-Gon, and then you kind of see now Qui-Gon's training Obi-Wan. And then now you see it come full circle when you get to Attack of the Clones, and Dooku was like, if Qui-Gon, and he's like, well, Qui-Gon would never do this with you, Dooku. He's like, you don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, now all that stuff kind of has like,
well, and then you
weight
almost,
to it.
you go even further than that. You get Obi-Wan and then Anakin. It's sort of like.
Exactly. And it keeps getting passed down.
It's this lineage.
Yep.
Which is almost why I wish they would do something. Well, they'd have to do animated now because Christopher Lee's no longer with us. But if they did something along the lines of maybe making a Jedi Lost animated movie.
Right. And well, it is already written that way.
Well, yeah. In fact, it was going to be a Clone Wars episode. And you know what? Given that was supposed to be a Clone Wars episode, and given the fact that Dark Disciple, I want to see those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I'm always wondering in the back of my mind, like, what would those have been like as Clone Wars episodes?
Yeah.
And would they have been as cool? See, that's the thing. Would they have actually been as cool?
Yeah, was if they translated from book to...
Right. I mean, on the other hand,
screen.
you figure it would probably be an arc. Like, it would probably be some sort of a story arc where, I mean, I'm sure it's not like a one-episode thing, right?
Right.
It would probably be like...
That's definitely like a 7...
3 or 4 episodes,
yeah,
maybe.
You can even do 7 out of those. I mean...
you could. I don't think they ever really went that long.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, like, if it was like, if it was, you create like a standalone type thing, though.
Oh, well, no, if you did that, like I said, what I think they should do, not that I have any influence at all, but, I mean, if it were me, I would want to go and start doing animated films, not just the series. I think that Disney Plus, especially because they're Disney, this is like what they started out doing.
Right.
I really think that one of the things they could do with Star Wars,
like DC does,
is actually make animated movies. Full-blown, full-length movies that are, like an hour and a half or whatever, and actually tell some of these stories that way. And they could even do that with they could bring in some of the stories of the novels. Because you could, number one, you could do anything you want in animation. You're not limited by, an actor's age or anything like that. And then you could bring in some of the classic people for voice work. You can, wheel in poor old James Earl Jones to, sit down and do a couple of sessions as Darth Vader. I mean, you could do some of these things if you wanted to.
True.
And that, I mean, it kind of brings us full circle, but they could almost even do that for the Solo movies. Because here's the thing, what I think that you could do that would be interesting. I don't think they would ever do this because I just don't think that they think that the Solo property is profitable enough. But what they could do is they could actually split it up, right? So maybe you do a Solo 2 movie. Maybe you do a limited Solo miniseries, like a Disney Plus series, and then maybe you do an animated film. Because think about this. That stupid book that took me a half a year to read, The Last Shot, it was a great book. And that's essentially it was weird. It was sort of like it happened. It was kind of like at times a Solo prequel, a direct Solo sequel, and then a Return of the Jedi sequel, all in one book, because it hit these different ages of Han and Lando. And I mean, that thing would make a phenomenal movie or series, or probably an animated film, would be more appropriate for that. And they could get, especially what they could do is they could get Alden and Donald Glover to voice the younger versions of them. And then they could get Billy D. Williams and Harrison Ford to voice the older versions.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing would be amazing. And people would eat that up. Remember in the whole Batman thing before Adam West died?
Oh, yeah. When
they did those two movies. Yeah. Those animated movies. They were great.
Yeah.
I mean, they captured the spirit of the 66 show. But at the same time, they moved the story forward and they gave you that style.
Yeah.
Definitely. And they could do that. It could totally live in an animated feature film realm. That's what I'm thinking anyway. That works. What's important is, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that, do you think that we should just leave Solo alone? I mean, one of the things that I actually did say in the description that I did not say in the, at any time during this show so far is, should they even make anything, as far as Solo goes? So, let us know that. Let's just get Ronaldo's comment in here real quick. He says, I don't know how true it is, but rumor has it that Lucasfilm does not adapt novels or comics because they said that they are books the audience would not understand, which does not make sense. Well, keep in mind, though, and this is what I would say if anybody said anything to Lucasfilm, Dark Disciple, Jedi Lost started out as Clone Wars treatments. I mean, they were, if it actually went on that season 6, the real season 6, not that crazy, half crazy episode,
season,
whatever it was. If we had gotten a real season 6 of that show, those would have been episodes. So, I mean, the idea is, I think that's just lazy, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree.
But, what do you guys think? Do you think that there should be a Solo 2? Do you think it should be a movie, a TV series, a comic series, a feature film, animated, whatever? Let us know in the comments section. You can also hit us up at HeadToHeadSW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And, of course, hey, if you guys are liking what you guys are seeing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to the channel, like the channel, hit the bell, do all that stuff so you guys can be notified when we're going to be doing some more stuff. All right, it looks like we're about to go to war here, huh?
Yes.
All right, what do we got next?
Next, we have Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, and that was our friend Darth Maul that was on there. Hey, we were just talking about him. All right, well, it looks like we're doing a little bit of a creature feature on this week.
Yeah, man. Halloween just passed. So
yeah.
I figured we'd do a little creature feature. So this week we're going to cover which one, I guess, which one is worse?
This is so stupid. I mean,
the Sarlacc pit or a Krayt Dragon? Now that we've actually really truly seen a Krayt Dragon, if you've been following Mandalorian.
Yeah. And if you haven't, or if you have and you want to check out our review, on our show last week.
Yep.
It's we'll put a link in the description. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to go with, if we're talking about which one we would least likely want to go up against.
Yeah.
Well, for many reasons, I'm going to say that I would least want to deal with the Krayt Dragon.
Okay.
But I think that the Sarlacc pit would freak me out more because the problem with the Sarlacc pit is you could just be walking around and boom, you just fall in.
Right.
You have no idea. And then there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, the
Right.
thing is like designed in such a way that you're kind of screwed if it happens.
Right.
And it could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with the Krayt Dragon, it's mobile, it's big, it can do, I mean, it would actually be more problematic. Like I would want to deal with less because the Sarlacc pit is static. I could avoid it if I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the important distinction. And that's why it's really tough because both of these things are just the things that nightmares are made of.
Yeah.
But I would have to go. I think that ultimately it's weird. It's like, how you might have an opponent in a fight who's like really fast and really skilled.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another person who's like just
Really
incredibly strong.
Mm-hmm.
But slower. And the idea is like, okay, yeah, you could probably beat me, but if I ever get a hold of you, then it's over.
Yep.
And I think that that's where the Sarlacc pit is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you get into the Sarlacc pit, you're pretty much done.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do about it. Well, at least we'll have to see what our friend Boba Fett has to say. But other than that, though, the Krayt Dragon can attack you at any time from anywhere. I mean, they're generally territorial. They almost like remind me of, well, they totally remind me of either the Dune worm or the Tremors worm.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's kind of the same thing. Like you don't know when this thing's going to attack. It could come out and just, totally devastate you. So I'm going to go with the Krayt Dragon.
I'm going to go Sarlacc pit.
Probably for some of the reasons I was talking about.
Definitely. But the thing is to kind of piggyback off to piggyback off your whole thing with the Krayt Dragon, the thing about it is like you kind of know it's coming. Like it makes sounds, it pretty much like shakes the whole ground. I mean, that thing. So you kind of,
I could see that.
If you feel that, granted, you still don't know where it's going to pop up from, though. As we saw from Mandalorian, that thing, 1 minute it's coming out that little cave, next thing you know, it's coming out the top of the thing, and then, it's crazy. However, the Sarlacc pit, though, the thing about it is that, one, I think it's creepy, just the fact that you can just not only just fall into that thing, but if you're close enough, that thing could just grab you and suck you down. And then on top of that, like you're digested slowly for over 1,000 years. So it's not even a quick death.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
The Krayt Dragon is pretty much just like you're in that thing, it's over with. Or that thing spits some acid on you, man. It's like, all right, it's over with. And
that's a good point.
And a lot
too.
of times that thing just comes up and swallows you before you even realize what's happening. So to me, like that's almost like a quicker death in a way. Like that poor Tusken Raider man was gone in like, it was like a tic-tac to that thing. But
you do make
to the Sarlacc pit,
excellent point.
To the Sarlacc pit, though, it's just like and even 3PO says like you would learn a new pain and suffer. To suffer for that long, like that would just be because now you're just in the belly, literally in the belly of the beast, and you just have to sit there and just wait. Hopefully that you can just kill.
You gotta wonder though when that's one of those things. Again, you were talking earlier about I don't know if we asked a lot of questions. That's another one that we were talking about when Return of the Jedi came out. We were sitting there thinking like, how does that even work? Like you're slowly digested for 1,000 years, but at which point do you die? And I'm sure it would be different from depending on your health and your basically, and then of course what species you are as well.
Yeah.
Whether you're a Tusken Raider or a human or a
Rodian
or a Rodian or there's basically differences from that standpoint. But at some point though, like if you were to take an average, what would be the average amount of time before you die? Because it sounds terrible, but if you think about it, if you're slowly digesting over 1,000 years, you're digesting, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're alive that whole time.
True.
But it does mean that you're alive for a while. And I see that
Yeah,
Ronaldo's got a couple. So he goes for the Krayt Dragon.
Yeah, he's I go for the Krayt Dragon. I can be careful not to fall into a Sarlacc, or at least try. He also says, now if we're talking about the Sarlacc we see in Jedi Fallen Order, that's another story. That thing is huge.
Dude, that thing was like...
it can grab an entire ship.
Yeah, I never played the game, but if you actually look that up...
Yeah.
That's like some sort of crazy super Sarlacc.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, and the thing about a Sarlacc, though, and everybody's talking about, like, if I can see it, and that's the thing that's to me, it's almost like that movie Open Water we always talked about.
Yep.
It's like...
It's totally like that.
And it's like, especially, I'm always wondering because, like, at Tatooine at night...
That's it.
That would freak me out. I mean, that would just literally... even just literally unnerve me because you can't see in front of you.
You couldn't see in front of you. I mean, it really is,
Yeah.
Sure, they can make another genre film, Open Sand.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're right. I mean, and it's not even just the Sarlacc pits. Well, now you had the Krayt Dragon that's out there somewhere.
They even have quicksand pits out there, too.
Quicksand pit. I mean, you got all kinds of, like, weird creatures and stuff like that are out there.
Yeah, even those little dogs or wolves that those Tusken Raiders had, like, those things are freaky.
Those things are freaky. There's actually a lot of freaky things on Tatooine.
Yeah, man. I mean,
a lot of times people are like, well, that'd be kind of cool because, you think of, like, Mos Eisley and you just think of the moisture. I mean, you don't really stop and think about all this stuff. I mean, even Tusken Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I actually enjoyed about The Mandalorian last week was the fact that you got to see another side of the Tusken Raiders and their whole... I think thing or whatever was just sort of expanded on.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was clever. But still,
even Jawas are creepy.
Sure.
I mean, you could kick them around, but I mean, those things are still like...
Yeah, and if you got enough of them,
they can jump you, man.
I could see that not going well. I mean, it's not as bad as the Ewoks, so it would probably like eat you, but
right.
Who knows what the Jawas do.
Exactly.
I mean, they're crazy, but yeah, I mean, I don't think we would really want to see either one of these things.
And now I have this question. So, like, I know the Sarlacc is like this little worm or this giant worm type thing that has like these tentacles that come out.
Well,
but, like,
thanks to the special edition.
But what are like those teeth things? Like
the spike thing?
Yeah, like, is that part of the pit or is that part of the Sarlacc?
I think that's part of the Sarlacc. I think what it probably does is so it would go into the dirt, right? And then its teeth would like protrude. I mean, actually, that's an interesting thing too, because I remember reading about that in the whole like essential guide to creatures and whatever, and they dealt with it then. And then, of course, I'm sure Star Wars Databank at StarWars.com, they probably talk about it. But there are differences in the way that it was depicted before and then the way it's depicted now. Because, as Ronaldo points out, Jedi Fallen Order, right? They've expanded on it, made it even freakier and scarier and deadlier, actually.
Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, it's almost like, if I were really being honest, this would have to be a draw for me. I don't even know if I could choose, because I think it's like an equal... I wouldn't want to face either one of these equally.
Right.
But for different reasons.
Sure. Yeah, it's like, who would you rather fight, Vader or Palpatine? It's like, well, neither one of them, man. They're both...
Right.
They're both, like, vicious, and they both, are ridiculously powerful. Like, okay, maybe and, Vader's stronger physically, and, but the Palpatine, he's just ruthless.
And, of course, Ronaldo.
The worst thing in Tatooine is not the Sarlacc, the Krayt Dragon, or the Tusken Raiders. It's sand. It gets everywhere. Actually, and we'll actually get to this when we talk about the Mandalorian. But honestly, that heat, man, because you got twin suns.
The heat, and also the sand, really, because look at that sandstorm that came up in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And the sand, I mean, it's like, it's kind of funny because it's a play on a line from the Phantom Menace, but it really is true, though,
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, but what about you guys? Where are you guys leaning on this one? We know what Ronaldo thinks. What about you guys? If you're watching us live, of course, you could still chat in. You can also hit us up at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Maybe you could show us like your favorite Sarlacc or Krayt Dragon picture. Or if you're watching the rebroadcast, leave it in the comment section. Let us know which would you fear facing most? You know, this Krayt Dragon or the Sarlacc pit? Like, you know, where are you going with this? For me, it's a draw. Your final answer?
I'm still going Sarlacc.
Still going Sarlacc. All right. So with that, I think it's finally time to officially, I mean, because of the stupid cold, I've been trying to keep myself somewhat hydrated, but hey, I'm going to keep myself super hydrated now. We are going to the Cantina.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we are in the Cantina. I'm getting my my drink of choice, which is water today. You know, I was actually thinking of doing a whole thing to where maybe we feature different blends of coffee or something stupid. Like, you know, you see that all the time with these coffee and conversation shows.
Mm-hmm.
And that would almost be fun to do at some point, you know, because there was that one interview I was telling you about with Mark Hamill that the Russo brothers and all those guys do. And it's like I think it was them. They actually have like a different, it's almost like a pizza theme. Like they do pizza and whatever the thing is. And they all talk about what pizza they're getting from their local shop, you know, which is kind of, it just got me thinking. But we have the Mandalorian to review here.
Yes, we do.
All right, so take it away.
All right. So, Chapter 10, Mandalorian.
Man, it's like you're about to read a book.
Right. So, this particular episode, it was cool, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I liked it, but I thought that it was filler.
It was definitely filler.
But it was funny because, and I don't know if he's watching or not, or even listening in the background, but Connor and I watched it together. Doug couldn't, he had to leave before we had a chance to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But we enjoyed it. But our overall thoughts were like, his thought was that the takeaway is that the New Republic knows who he is. And that's significant. And that's going to be significant later on.
Mm-hmm.
Which I felt the same way. But my whole problem with it, like I thought it was a good episode. I actually like the fact that they're doing these almost like these adventure type episodes now. Because that was the idea behind The Mandalorian, is that he was going to go from planet to planet and have these different adventures. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the plot. My problem with it was I think it's too early for this kind of episode. You give us this spectacular opening episode, and it has all this stuff that, you know, pertains to the overall story arc that we've been following since season 1. And there was really nothing that happened other than some disturbing things about Baby Yoda and the fact that the New Republic knows who Din is.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, I thought that the New Republic kind of had sort of a dark, sinister vibe to them.
Did you?
Yeah, you know who they kind of reminded me of in a way? Which is kind of a weird reference to make, but I think it was at the end of 28 Days Later where they found the military base and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. You know, these guys are going to save us from the zombies. But those guys ended up being like there was something a little off about them, a little dark.
Think about the fact that they just flew off and just left them there?
Well, it wasn't that they flew off and left them there. I mean, they tried like raping and killing the chick. And then they basically like they were sort of cool at first, but you could tell there was something a little off about them, and then they just started to slowly turn against them. It was just that weird, like they weren't really the good guys kind of thing. I got a vibe from those dudes that was a little odd. And even if you actually listen to the conversation that they were having back and forth with Din when they were, you know, when they first encounter him, it was weird.
I didn't think it was weird. I mean, I just felt like they were just policing stuff. I thought they were really cool because honestly, they didn't want to shoot him down. They were
Well,
just
they
like,
didn't, and I think that it's I don't know. There was just some like creepy vibe that I got from those guys.
they were just like, oh, we got a runner, knock another one. It's like, all right, here we go. You know what I mean? I just felt like, because they were just like, okay, they were just going to let him like, because Den was, that was just so funny just because Den was doing the typical thing. Like, I want to say if you got pulled over by the police or something.
Oh, yeah,
and
totally.
that's what made it so hilarious. He's like, no, I don't. He's like, well, this is the older thing. He's like, oh, well, this is New Republic now. He's like, all right, you know what? You're right. I'll work on that. And I'm like, all right, cool. Oh, yeah, one more thing. We need that ping or pick or whatever the heck they were asking for. And of course, like, he was trying to, like, oh, yeah, no, I got it. It's right here. And then I guess something tipped them off, and then that's when he's realized.
Yeah, then he flies off or whatever. And there was that one part too where it was kind of like, well, oh wait, here it is, now it's working, kind of thing.
Yeah,
where I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he got busted on, and that was cool. I mean, there was.
And I think when he was running from him, he was just like, oh, because I think he just realized like, okay, crap, the New Republic, because he remembers that whole prison thing that he did. So he was wondering like, okay, this probably has something to do with that. Because if you remember, like, they saw him as he was flying away.
Yeah, by the way, I feel the need that I should mention this again. This is a spoiler discussion.
Oh. Yeah.
Not that there's really a whole lot to spoil in this episode, though.
I mean, yeah, it's not like
I mean, you could completely, like, we could actually act it out for everybody, and it wouldn't matter.
Because it was a filler episode.
And that's it. And that was my problem with it, is it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, and I think, to me, I felt like this episode wasn't necessary, just because it didn't advance the story at all, really. I mean, except for that point like you made, I will concede to that. That, okay, yes, it does make us aware that the New Republic.
Yeah, but you have to admit, though, it was kind of an exciting. I mean, it was cool, but the problem is, I honestly think that you would like it if it wasn't the second episode of this anticipated second season.
Yeah, I mean,
you introduced Boba Fett, for crying out loud, and now you're giving us like space spiders.
And frogs.
But
the thing is, which is hilarious, I don't speak frog.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, and that's the thing. I like the fact that the comedy is...
comedy is cool. However, I just feel like there's too much... And maybe this is the price of knowing too much. When you know that, like, okay, Gideon's got this Darksaber.
Yep.
You got, pretty much Ahsoka is pretty much...
That's exactly what Connor said today.
And then you got Boba Fett in this thing. It's like, okay. And we don't know why Gideon is why he wants Baby Yoda, so it's kind of like, all right. I would rather them at least focus on the character that we don't like. Okay, we'll focus on Gideon then.
Well, that's the problem that I had, and this is what actually goes to my whole point, is the fact that you only have, like, what, 8 episodes of the show?
And that's my whole thing. Now, one thing I will say, and I'm thankful that, like last week's episode was like 53, 54 minutes.
Oh, yeah, and this was like 40-something.
41. Yeah. So if they're going to, play with the time, at least it's on the other side of 30 minutes. So I appreciate that so far. That much I do love so far.
Yeah, it's actually starting to look like we're going to get longer episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to.
Yeah, I mean, in order to tell these stories, either you're going to get longer episodes or you're going to have more episodes. It has to be one of the other.
Right. But I mean, and it's totally true. And I was feeling the same way, where it's kind of like, okay, you've got all this story you have to tell. And what pains me is, like, they're probably going to just, like, blow through some, like, really cool concept that they could spend time on.
Exactly.
If we didn't have, like, little frogs with tadpoles and space spiders.
Exactly.
Let's see what Ronaldo says. He goes, I really liked it. I like episodes where Mando goes on his own adventures, different from the main story. The problem is that this type of episode we just saw last week. Yeah. I kind of agree. I agree with the overall point. I disagree with the fact that that's what we saw last week. But I could see where that could actually, like, I could see where people can make that criticism about last week's episode. I happen to feel that it advances the overall story arc very much.
I'm talking about
Last week's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially like, okay, when you got like Cobb Vanth, and then like, that was just cool. That was a surprise. I mean,
Sure, that they actually put in a new canon novel character, and this really is talking about, like, look, we admit that they probably teased Boba Fett in Chapter 5, but they didn't really expand on it. And then he's going off to look for Mandalorian. So now you had this guy who, in canon, actually has Boba Fett's armor. If you're dealing with the Mandalorian looking for other Mandalorians around this time period, you kind of have to deal with this.
Yeah, Ronaldo says, I found it very fun and exciting, and what I didn't like didn't make me dislike the whole episode. He also says, it's not a big deal, but the giant ant made me think, really? It doesn't seem very creative. It's just a giant ant. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things. It's like, okay, the creatures like, all right, you got a giant ant, a giant frog, and, it's like, so we've already seen a giant snake before. But I mean, my whole thing is this, like, I feel like with this particular episode, what was kind of like, it was cute at first, but like Baby Yoda keep trying to eat those stupid eggs was kind of like creepy to me.
Dude, it was never cute to me.
It was cute at first, like the very first.
No, here's the thing that was so funny. Like Connor and I were watching it, right? And, we see how he's eyeing it. And Connor's like, he's going to eat those eggs. I'm like, no way, dude. I'm like, he's not going to eat them. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, because that would be too grim and gruesome. And like, I mean, it just, no way. And then he pops one in his mouth and I'm like, no way, dude. They actually went there. I mean, that was like one of those things where it's just kind of like, it showed somewhat of a darker, it was almost like the whole force choke thing, but it was even worse. It was almost like, it kind of reminded me of the Ewok thing where you saw some things where it was like, you know what? These creatures, I mean, besides the fact that they were about to cook them for a dinner, but, you see like the stormtrooper helmet and those stormtroopers didn't meet just the typical, like they were probably part of the feast.
Oh, yeah. But I mean,
that little thing's carnivorous, man.
Well, yeah, it pretty much will eat. I mean, the thing is, like, for that thing to be so small, it has a healthy appetite because
sure does.
One of those giant, I mean, the egg was about the size of its head first and foremost, and then he didn't even like chew it. He just sucked that thing down. And then after that, like, he went over and he ate one of the little spider things, and then
dude, he is if you go across, universe here and go into Star Trek, he is the Wesley Crusher of the show.
Oh yes, definitely.
He gets everybody into trouble, and then it's kind of like,
but he has the ability to get you out sometimes.
Yeah, but he hasn't. If you think about it, he hasn't really shown that yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, because
I kind of thought when that one spider was attacking the ship, like it kind of looked like he was about to do something.
Well, yeah, you saw his hands out, and then that's when the frog thing pulled out a blaster and shot it. But my whole thing is that whole egg thing, and it's like, okay, the first time I was like, okay, it's cute. It doesn't know. It's just whatever. Okay, I get it. But then it's like he keeps coming back. He keeps like creeping over to that thing, and I'm like, what the heck is this thing's problem? And then of course, like afterwards, so like the very end, once again, it was like
that was like heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I'm just like,
it's like she's all like, you could see she's like loving and cuddling, and then he kind of looks, and then he's like.
Yeah, especially, he's kind of, and the thing, he knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
Because he's looking around and he's like.
But see, again, and that's another big takeaway that I don't think is accidental. What I have to say is that I trust Favreau and Filoni enough to feel that, and I said this to Connor today too, I said, even though this kind of feels like a filler episode, and if you just take it on its own for what it is, well, we're only at the second episode, so we only know from last episode and this episode. totally fits the bill of filler. I have a feeling that we're going to find out later on. It's not, I think it's deceptively filler. I think that there's a lot of key things that we're going to look back on this episode and go, you know what?
Oh.
Now I get it. And you're going to find out that this episode is probably more, what I called it wasn't filler, it was establishment. It's an establishing episode. And I'm like, the problem with establishing episodes is they could seem like filler, but they're not. They basically are establishing things that are going to come up and actually be very important later on. My problem is I just wish it hadn't been so early in the season. But then again, if it is an establishment thing, then, and they only have 8 episodes, well, you got to set it up now.
Yeah.
It looks like Ronaldo's like...
Well, he's testing my knowledge of Spanish, which
yeah,
sadly,
actually, I think that
I didn't do so well in high school with.
Well,
but what he did put is I'm split on this one.
Let's do the English one.
On one hand, I found it adorable when Baby Yoda ate the eggs, but on the other hand, he was literally wiping out an entire race.
Yeah,
exactly.
Man. It's like the last right.
And she's like, it's this whole desperate plea that she's like, look, I'm trying to get to my husband. I got my this, and then like on top of that, like she's bathing in this, the waters of Lake Minnetonka in the back, with her eggs floating around. And then once again, he's like, ooh, and he's walking over to him. He keeps trying to, and he's like, no. It's just like a bad dog or something.
Well, and the other thing that it was funny when we were watching it, Connor brings up, he's like, okay, at what point does he stop being like this and becomes a
right, yeah,
like, because Yoda wouldn't do that,
right? But see, that's the other thing too, though. It's like we don't necessarily know, because it's like it's funny because it behaves like a child because it is a child. So it's like when it was time to like. When the hole was all broken up and it was time to go to sleep, and he crawls up on the Mandalorian and kind of lays on like
yeah.
Dad,
I mean, he's well, like, and again, I mean,
or he'll walk over to him.
Kids do know when they're doing something wrong, but they do it anyway because they're not necessarily. They know it's wrong, but they're not really thinking of all the ramifications, all the consequences. I mean, that little thing's not thinking of the fact that the mother is. Yeah, I mean, it's
just harboring food.
But it's like, is this the Damien of? The Star Wars universe.
And that's what I'm saying. We don't know what this Yoda, quote unquote, is going to become. Like, what if this is like a whole dark side Yoda that we don't even know about?
Well, that was kind of the thing I was thinking about it, man. I mean, it was like one of those things where I was starting to think of like, hey, maybe that little depiction of the dark side Yoda artwork or whatever that I don't even remember where that came from, but whatever it was super cool. It was actually my wallpaper for a while. Yeah. Are we going to get a dark side version of Yoda? Are we going to stop calling him Baby Yoda and call him Dark Side Yoda?
Yeah. Darth Yoda.
Yeah, Ronaldo says, sorry, wrong language. My dad actually spoke it pretty fluently, though.
Oh, sweet.
You'd probably interpret it. But, yeah, I mean, I think that overall, I think it was good.
So we can say, though, it was an alien that they didn't land on, though.
Yeah, well, they were supposed to go to Trask. Yeah.
But that other plane,
Well, because remember, this sort of came up because the Tatooine lady was all like, hey, could you, take this woman,
Yeah.
I
trust her with my life. I'm a good character. I mean, she's hilarious. I love her, actually.
Yeah, it was funny because at first, I remember when she first popped up in 5, I didn't hate her, but I was like, she might be kind of annoying. But now she's kind of cool. It's sort of like
she's kind of like the new Quill in a way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ronaldo.
Oh, yeah. When Baby Yoda ate that egg at the end, I was like, ouch, that's evil. I know.
Totally evil,
yeah, because I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it was like, he's like looking around, and I'm thinking like, okay, he finally learned his lesson, and then he still
right.
pops
It kind of like, yeah. I mean, it's just like, that was the thing. It was kind of like when he looked at the lady frog and basically was kind of like, okay, she's like, hugging her tadpoles or eggs or whatever, and it's kind of like, okay, he could kind of see like, oh, and then he kind of has that look and he pops one in his mouth. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody
I
wants
mean,
to
how
like give
good
him a
are
whooping.
these things?
Yeah. Well, see, my thing is too is like one, like where are you putting that? Like you're like this big. You know, like baby Yoda's like this. It's like it's like a foot tall.
Well,
But then
he definitely seemed a lot hungrier this episode because first he ate like 6 eggs or something, and then he goes and he sees the spider eggs. Like,
Yep,
and to him that was like a buffet, man. I mean, he was all like wide-eyed and
mm-hmm.
and everything, and he's going up and he like breaks that out and eats, and it's like I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, this thing will eat anything. I mean,
Yeah.
pulling out this spider thing and it's all goopy and gross, and I'm like, what don't you eat?
Well, I mean, just like when he ate that whole little frog thing, on Quill's planet.
See, all I can say is when Yoda looked at Luke and say, I don't know how you got so big eating food of this kind, I'm like, really, man? Really?
Yep. Well,
But here's the funny thing, though, is that Yoda was making like stews and
yeah, but you don't know what was in that thing, though.
Luke was all about it, though, remember?
No, he just kind of just ate it because I guess that's all he had to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, not a lot of culinary options. And not to mention the fact that, yeah, who knows what he's killing over there on Dagobah, man. I mean, there's like all kinds of stuff.
You got snakes crawling through his little hut and everything. So
that would be like the Mecca for Baby Yoda.
Oh, yeah, he'd be all about that.
He'd be eating that. I mean, there'd be nothing left on that planet by the time he was done.
Talk about being vegan.
Well, I mean, but then look at all the carnivorous life on that thing.
Ronaldo says, those spider eggs gave me alien vibes.
Yes.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. I even said that to when Connor and I were trying to figure out like what they were. Because we knew that there was some. I'm like, I don't know, man. It like because he was like, he guessed it was a giant spider. And I'm like, yeah, it has to be something like that. Because it kind of looks like alien. And one of the coolest scenes I thought was when Din actually caught it and crushed. Like one of the spiders jumped at it and he caught it. And just like crushed it.
But he's going to town with that flamethrower though. Now that's the time you use it.
Well, that was the thing. I'm surprised it took him that long. Because first they're like blasting, and I'm like, why don't you just use a flamethrower, man? I mean, you've been using it like for everything.
One of the things I did enjoy, was that whole little move that he pulled at the very beginning when they tried to, he tried to kill the Baby Yoda, and then he gave him his jetpack.
Oh yeah,
I knew that was coming, but I was just like,
he was a little bit too,
he was way too
cooperative.
Calm. He's like, look, oh yeah, you want it? Cool.
Yeah, okay.
He waited till he got the safe distance and just shot him straight up in the air,
and shot him right down.
Yep.
Yeah, that was actually I thought was pretty smooth.
But
I mean,
honestly,
I will say
though,
the Mandalorian was actually kind of cool in this.
I mean, it had cool things. Like, I mean, I will say, like, when those guys tried to, jump him, pretty much that whole, like, rope trick, like, that they use in Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
And I'm just, like, seeing Baby Yoda go on fire. I'm like, honestly, at the speed that they were going, I mean, both of them should have been, like, out of there. But, it's the Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's kind of like and again, it was such a cool opening that it really gave you hope on what the episode was going to be. And that's the thing that was a little bit heartbreaking about it.
Well, that's what I was saying. And when we were talking about, like, the harsh things about Tatooine, because, like, okay, I'm just thinking about what it would be like to be the Mandalorian. Like,
well, yeah, we were talking about that too. Like, does he have, like, refrigeration in that suit?
Yeah, because it's like, all right, you're already on Tatooine. That thing is beaten down. You don't take your helmet off.
Right.
So it's like, and you're all metal, like you're in steel.
That helmet would seriously need like some disinfectant.
And you already still got the acid on it from like,
oh man,
the Krayt Dragon still on that thing.
I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to.
And so he had to fight a bunch of those guys, and then it's like, all right, now you got.
He should have been the one bathing in that little Minnetonka
little spa. Yeah,
yeah, right.
Yeah, but then like he had to pick up like everything, and then he's carrying like that big hunk of like dragon meat. He's got all his tools. He's got the baby, and he's just trekking across this desert. I mean, like, he's got to be worn out, man. I mean, just from the
The other thing I
sheer
didn't understand,
heat.
too, is why not use the jetpack?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, dude, I mean, granted, it probably wouldn't last too long, but it would,
Get you,
get you a little bit quicker,
yeah, at least cut down the time a little bit.
So Ronaldo was,
Yeah, I love the
Krykna spiders.
The Krykna spiders, yeah.
That was cool. So you actually, you know the name of them. Very impressive.
Yeah, a little Jason menu, I see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing, too. It's like, where was that listed?
Well, the spiders?
Yeah.
Mm.
Did somebody actually say it?
And by the way, he says, and by the way, no matter what Kanan says, if I see one of those spiders, I run for my life.
Yeah, well, that was the thing that I said, actually, during the whole time that I was watching it, too.
Yeah, as soon as I
When
see
that
those...
came out, I'm like, first of all, I wouldn't have even made it. I would have died of cardiac arrest. Because, I mean, if you just actually put yourself in the situation.
The baby spiders freaked me out, let alone
the baby spiders would be, and then when
Those
that
things are
big
huge.
thing comes out, it's like, really, man? I mean, if you actually saw that in real life, or like the Krayt Dragon, the thing comes out, if you saw that in real life, you would basically just die of shock.
Absolutely.
There'd be no way. You'd be you'd be petrified. Now, granted, I get it. In this universe, these people are dealing with this stuff all the time.
Right.
But if I see a bear, I'm probably going to freak out.
Right.
If I saw some spider that looked like that, then it, opened up and had all his teeth. I mean, if I even just saw an earth spider, crap, that ant in the cantina would have freaked me out.
Yeah, he was a doctor.
Exactly. And he was just like this normal, cool guy or whatever, but I'd be like,
I'm about to grab some Raid or something.
Exactly. But, again, I thought it was a good episode if you just take it for what it is. I just felt it was a little too early for an episode like that, even though I am fully putting my money on the fact that it was an establishing episode more than a filler episode, and that 3-4 episodes down the line, we're probably, by the way, it's a drinking game every time I say episode. 3 or 4 episodes down the line, we're probably going to look back on this and go, now I understand why they had this in there. But I have to say that, especially because we can't binge these things, like, it'd be different if you just, gave us the entire season at once.
Right.
But, I mean, this is, terrible, man. I mean, it's like, okay, we got to...
Wait a whole nother week?
Yeah, now we got to wait a whole nother week for this.
Yeah, and hope that, it's actually okay, we get back to the main story type of situation.
Yeah, and I've got, the thing that's funny is I'm going to be setting up on this job all next Friday. So it's like, I'm probably going to have to, watch the episode right before we go on or something. Because one of the things that we're doing, by the way, in case, you guys might have caught on, but... Well, last week, it was basically our main topic. We just talked about the whole season premiere and everything. What ended up becoming Chapter 9, but was actually Episode 1. Now, for the first segment of the Cantina every week, we're going to talk about...
Mandalorian.
Yeah, the Mandalorian. So I'm really hoping that... Well, hopefully, we're not going... We're actually going live at 8 o'clock next week. But we'll... Just so you guys know, there's... That could be up in the air, but it just bothers me that you wait a week and then you see an episode like this.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. Hopefully, next week we're definitely back on the.
Well, they have to be. Now you're on an episode 3 of an 8-episode thing. I mean, they almost have to be.
Yep.
What was the title of it? I remember last week you gave us all the titles.
Well,
today was The Passenger.
Yeah, today was a passenger. But. They're not. I was thinking of those too, and of course these aren't matching up. So,
so was the second episode called something different?
Mm-hmm.
Now that was obviously a pre-release thing.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, man. Hopefully next week they just knock it out of the park with something really cool. Again, I can't say that in the grand scheme of things. I have a feeling that if I go back and rewatch this after the whole season's been released, I'll probably enjoy it. It's a really good, fun, cool adventure type episode.
Mm-hmm.
But watching this in a first run situation,
yeah,
Yeah, this is kind of disappointing for me. But what about you guys? What do you guys think? You see where Daryl and I stand on this. Were you guys satisfied with this episode? Did you like it or did you not like it? Let us know in the comments. All right, what do we got next?
All right, so now we're gonna switch over to Mr. John Boyega.
Yeah, John Boyega, I guess, had a little bit of a heart-to-heart with Disney, huh?
Little come to John meeting, I guess.
I do think it's hilarious, though, before you get too deep into this. One of the things that jumped out about me, or no, that's not right. One thing that
I was like, really?
you're kind of like, oh, you discovered a little of yourself in this thing. One of the things that jumped out at me about this article.
That's right. Syllable that
Now,
thing out.
yeah, sound it out. Let's hey, is the fact that he was all at one point yeah, I mean, it'd be cool to do a Disney Plus show or something like that, and I'm like, oh, okay, so back then it was you're not gonna Disney Plus me, and now that apparently, he's gotten a lot of his feelings out. Because I think that's what we were seeing a lot, especially during the Rise of Skywalker. I think there was a lot of things that were pent up that were bothering him. And it caused him to act in this somewhat passive-aggressive way, especially when he was talking about the Disney Plus thing. And we even brought it up, because I think that was a featured story. I mean, it might not have been the featured topic, but I remember we did feature it in one of the segments where we were talking about how he was going off and saying, you're not going to Disney Plus me, and I'm, all this other stuff. And it's it's a little uncharacteristic for him. I mean, it didn't really fit when you look at the way that he was and his attitude in the beginning with The Force Awakens, and even during, after the premiere and all that, to what had happened when he made those comments. It was okay, something's going on underneath here, that it's more than just about the movie or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, John Boyega is pretty much, he felt a way about his character, Finn being kind of pushed to the sidelines, which
I think we all did.
And understandably so. I honestly agree with him on that.
We've gone on record several times of saying, you know what, you created this really cool character that had a story arc that really could have gone somewhere, and you give us Canto Bite.
Right.
It's and things like that. It's you could have developed the Finn character. You could have split it off through all the movies. I mean, it did, I will say, and I think you brought this up on one of the shows too, it did have a promising start.
It did.
The Force Awakens, I thought I'll actually retract that a little bit. They did a pretty good job, I thought, of establishing the story. The problem is when they picked it up in The Last Jedi, he was absolutely wasted through that whole movie.
Definitely. And then you try to make up for it in Rise of Skywalker, but it's not enough time to do it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much his issue. And then they also said the 28-year-old, was kind of upset as well as with some of the racist backlash that he faced.
Yeah, I mean, was the idea that he didn't think that Disney responded in his defense appropriately, or
I think it has something to do with a lot of different things, especially when you're dealing with, and we've heard things from other actors being in Hollywood, and some things are done, of course, more or less behind the scenes, or even they write you a certain way to the point where it's okay, you're I'm supposed to be kind of a lead and star in this thing, and then you kind of push me, the black guy, to the back, basically. And he says, I was very honest and it was a very honest and very transparent conversation. There's a lot of explaining on their end in terms of the way they saw things. They gave me a chance to also explain what my experience was like. I hope that me being so open with my career at this stage will help the next man, the guy who wants to be the assistant director of photography, the guy that wants to be a producer. I hope that the conversation is not such a taboo or elephant in the room because someone just came and said it. And we've seen John Boyega, especially doing the whole Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, well, that's what
And
I was thinking that maybe this was. I was actually surprised to learn that a lot of it focused on just his character and all that stuff, because I kind of figured maybe it was going to be more about like he felt that he had to go, because I remember he was actually saying like, I don't know how they're going to feel about me doing this.
well, I mean,
And
yeah,
there was some backlash actually.
well, yeah, I mean, he's using his platform to do what he felt was right. One,
Right, and I don't think he felt. I don't
And
think
that-
anybody
and-
at Disney said anything to him.
but I don't think he was felt support for it, and I think
That was it.
That was the thing.
Yeah, that was the thing. And I think that's really, I thought that was going to be the pretty much like the primary focus of that.
Yeah, and I think, but when you couple that with like, okay, he being the only African American actor or it's one of the leads, and his story was the one that was kind of cast aside. Like, okay, we got more with Poe and his whole backstory as far as being a spice runner with that whole, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of got more things with that. You got more screen time with Poe actually having more to do as far as, in The Last Jedi when he was with Leia, and like that whole lesson, like, well, you have to learn to lead, and that type of thing. So you're looking at someone like Poe. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Oscar Isaacs, he's a phenomenal actor as well, and I don't think he was trying to take anything away from Oscar. However, I think he's still like, okay, we saw what happened with Rey. She's the star of the thing. Okay, fine, but I'm the one that's pretty much been in all the commercials. Like, when we first saw this thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
He
the
was
first
like
the
the
first
first-
thing you pop up, it's Finn, in the Stormtrooper fit. The first one of the big things, you see him with a lightsaber.
Yeah, honestly,
he's
the way
in
that he was portrayed, I thought he was going to be one of the primary characters.
Exactly, and that's where he was. That's his whole point. It's like, okay, but then you push me aside.
But you could make the argument though that Finn was kind of, I mean, Rey obviously is the main character,
Of
right?
course.
But Finn was more the main character of the three. He was more the main in Force Awakens, and then Poe kind of took over in Last Jedi, and then they kind of split the difference a little bit in Rise of Skywalker. So I mean, I don't necessarily know if I agree that was truly like that bad. My whole problem was I just think that they, story-wise, they could have done more with him.
Well, I think
like when he was featured, in other words.
Well, I think that's his big thing, is that, like, I think that his character didn't get a chance to really develop, and like even in Rise of Skywalker, when you see like, okay, he had this thing that he wanted to tell Rey, and of course he never says it.
Right.
So of course, then eventually he's like, oh well, this is what he was. Well, why didn't we get that in the movie?
Yeah, right.
You see what I'm saying? And so it's just like, once again, it's like, all right.
Yeah, it's because, I mean, if he's talking about he's force sensitive, I mean, it's kind of a big deal.
Thing. Yeah, since he already said he was a big deal. You know what I'm saying? So I think like there's a lot of those. That's what I'm saying. Like his character was so underutilized, but you have him out here in all the marketing. Why put him out here with, in Vanity Fair? Why do you have him in front of, if you're really not going to do anything with the character? And I think the biggest thing is too, once again, with the success, when you look at things like Black Panther, when you see a movie completely comprised mainly of African Americans, and what that did for our culture, for us to see that, and then now you have someone who could be prominent in a Star Wars movie, and you don't use them, it's like frustrating. It's like,
yeah, because if you think about it, back in the original trilogy, after they introduced Lando, he was a prominent guy in Return of the Jedi.
Exactly.
And
he was a big part of Empire,
Sure.
so he's really big part of 2 movies.
Yep.
And then they used him subsequently in other stuff. He popped up in
Rise
Rebels,
of Skywalker and Rebels, yep.
everything.
So,
You know what I'm saying? So he's, and so it's like, okay, well, now when I have the opportunity, it's like you're giving me an opportunity and then taking it away. It's almost like being like an Indian giver almost.
yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that's kind of where his
Yeah,
source
because
of
you know what,
contentment is.
and you know what actually
Discontent, I
bothers
should
me?
say.
What bothers me about Hollywood when it comes to any of the people of color, as far as like acting goes, is they'll capitalize on these actors and or characters and market them and be like, oh, look at us. We're all inclusive and we're this and we're that and we're sensitive to all that stuff. But then when it actually comes to anything, it's almost like when they're done with that and they look good, then they start pushing stuff off to the side.
Well, yeah, even if you look at like, okay, they did the same thing with Cheer It, right? You know, you get Jet Li to go out here and play,
Right.
you know, Cheer It Imwe, and then it's like, okay, because you want to get that Asian culture in it, and because it's not doing well over there. I mean, not.
No, that was absolutely it. It
I
wasn't
didn't say.
doing.
I didn't mean to say Jet Li.
Oh yeah, you did say Jet Li.
I don't know why I
didn't you?
said Jet Li. I meant.
Yeah, here we go. Now the Asian community is gonna hate us.
Well, at least he's
views.
still Asian. I mean, but no.
But if you're Asian and you're angry, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And
oh man, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank today, but he basically
Donnie
plays
Yen,
Donnie
right?
Yen, Ip Man. You're right. I kept wanting to say Ip Man because that's how I know. But it's just like, yes, Donnie Yen. So be the martial artist, right? So
yeah, you were the guy I remember that was talking about. Like I kind of knew who he was, but I remember you were the one that first.
Yeah, exactly.
Really started telling me like all this stuff, and yeah, exactly.
But
it's Donnie Yen.
I know, right? So,
and that does not sound like an Asian name, by the way. Well, the Yen part does, but you know,
Jason views. But no, it's one of those things where, like I said, I understand. You know, when you have the ability to have this platform. And, you know, people really aren't utilizing you. And, you know, it's like, okay, you know, little African-American boys are looking at like, oh, you know, I could be in a Star Wars movie, but it's like, but you can't have the big part. You see what I'm saying? Like, and that's kind of what.
Yeah, it'd be like, you too could be wasted in a Star Wars film and pretty much used for your, you know.
Yeah, just to say, well, we had one.
Yeah, we had one, you know.
You know, and I think that's kind of where Boyega was feeling, and especially like everything that's been going on in the world, especially in our country, you know, I think that's just, he really kind of took that to heart. And especially like once he started speaking out about it, you know, that's one of the big things, even with the NFL, you know, we knew the Colin Kaepernick thing, where that particular organization were not supportive of that particular movement. However, when you look at other organizations such as the NBA, they embraced it and they promoted it and they rallied behind their people. And I think that's kind of where John Boyega probably was hoping that Disney would do the same. And when he didn't get that, it's like it further just infuriated him, both professionally and personally.
But here's the thing, too, that I think is important is the fact that one of the things that I really like is, and again, because I was starting to lose a little bit of respect for Boyega for a while because it just seemed like he was off the rails, man. Like he was just, it's like, what is your problem, dude? Mm-hmm. But it's nice that instead of further infuriating the situation, that he actually obviously took the step like, listen, I'm going to come and I'm going to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to tell you like what's on my mind and, you know, see what we could do. And I mean, that's a really cool, you know, and of course now he's back to being the Boyega that we kind of knew before, where he's kind of like, oh yeah, man. And, you know, I'd love to do a Disney Plus series about Finn, which is a complete 180 from the whole you're not going to Disney Plus me. Because when he first said that, I'm like,
what's wrong with that? Like,
man, dude, first of all, that's
it
so,
almost sounds like
who are you, dude?
You almost sound like ungrateful.
Completely. It's like, you know, I mean, come on now. You're not like Eddie Murphy or, you know, some like big name star guy that can.
Yeah, like Kevin Hart or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, or kind of, I mean, even like Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, now, granted, it's not like he's been in, you know, he's done some weighty movies and stuff like that and some critically acclaimed stuff. And he's been in a lot of blockbuster films. But these are people that actually have a name, have respect and stuff. Like, you know, he'd been just basically in a couple of Star Wars films.
Yeah, he was in the movie Detroit, and then he did, what was it, Knives Out?
No.
Or was it Knives Out 2? Was this, maybe he's scheduled to be a Knives Out 2 or something.
Really?
I think so.
I guess I didn't think you were going to be able to Ryan Johnson him.
Well, he's already been done that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But I mean, it's just funny to me though, because, you know, at first he had that really negative reaction, which really kind of took me off guard. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of, because at first you're kind of like, okay, you're ungrateful and all that stuff, but it's like the more you think about it, the more you go, I
There's
don't
gotta
know,
be
man.
something-
There's got to be something.
Yeah,
to
because he
this.
doesn't seem like that type. Because he
No,
was so excited.
He was so excited, and it almost seemed like he became disenfranchised with everything. And it's like, okay, well, what's going on behind the scenes now that's
Right.
causing this? And that's why it's kind of cool that he was able to do this, work some things out.
And then kind of let us know like this.
Now
was
he's
going on.
yeah, and I mean that was to me that was a really stand up cool thing to do. I mean that's the way you handle stuff.
So breaking news though,
What?
Jason's here.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, I thought. Well, I mean, it's kind of like, look, 12 hours after
I
we
know.
go on last week, Sean Connery dies, and then of course,
Man,
well, Chadwick Boseman, right?
Yep. I mean that was
While we were on the air,
air.
so I mean, you say breaking news now, I'm kind of like, all right, who's no longer with us?
either that or we finally figured out who our president's going to be. But
Yeah,
anyway,
right. Exactly. There you go.
No, but man, we haven't seen Jason in a while, so it's good to see him, man. He says hello there. Sorry, I'm late. Trust me, you're not.
Yeah, dude, we
Not
were
today.
late. Yeah, we didn't start till like 9:30 or a little after 9:30 tonight because we're in a new place and it took us a while.
Yeah. Ronaldo says the good thing about this is that John probably expressed some of the problems that fans have to the Lucasfilm executive, whoever he is. Maybe Lucasfilm is learning from its mistakes in a way. He also agrees Jason, and he said, not Lucasfilm, I mean Disney. And then Jason says, I felt that Finn's personality didn't fit with the backstory in The Force Awakens. Sanitation, you got a cute boyfriend, really? You're supposed to be the ex-First Order. Why is he the comic relief? And then he also says, it wasn't as bad as The Last Jedi, though. And then, of course, he makes the comment about views. Well, here's the thing. And I can understand why he would be the comedic relief, because you got to think about it. Like, okay, in every faction, every military or whatever, like, okay, you got to have people you got cooks, you got people who do that stuff. I could understand why, and everybody, but even when you go into that, like, everybody has to go into basic training, no matter what you do. You have to complete basic training. So you learn how to shoot, you learn how to all the different codes, maneuvers, all different, because you never know when you're gonna get. Hey, we need to pull you, and you need to know what to do, at least the basics. Hence, basic training. So I could understand why, like, okay, if he was in sanitation, now, okay, maybe now why he was out there with, the rest of the troopers for this particular mission, I don't know. Now,
that part was weird, but I do totally agree that why do people feel that everybody has to be like this super key role in everything? You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of workers.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I liked about the sequel trilogy, actually, because they did this with Rose a little bit too, is they took people who were like lesser. They weren't the generals or the, like the Jedi, if you want to go into like Star Wars lore too, who happen to also be generals, actually.
Yeah.
But they weren't like the obvious choices. They were regular people doing the work, because that's one of the things that the novels do so well, is they give you an idea that, the Empires was made up of very human people, and there were just people that were going to work every day. They weren't, privy to the Emperor's big plans or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And the whole Empire is made up of people like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I loved about the fact that, the comedic relief, it's because, now see, if he was like a, like a Governor Price or Pride or something like that, or one of those type of people, like, okay, I can understand why would he be the comedic relief, or like a Hux or something like that, even though Hux was a comedic relief, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Hux ended up being...
but the other thing too, though, is that, like, when you look at the stormtroopers, you got to think about, like, okay, you're part of this thing.
Dude, the clone troopers were making jokes all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're going to make jokes. I mean, like, and then even when you see it in Mandalorian, those two guys is like, yep, all right, he just killed a bunch of people just for interrupting him. Okay, yeah, you know how these guys are, man. They got to come out here and show who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different than what you would do, like what we do. I mean, that's what made Star Wars so cool to me was because it's like it humanizes certain aspects of people.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that, and you find that in fantasy a lot of times too. And that's something that a lot of times, I mean, it's changing and it has been for a long time. And I think ironically it started with Star Trek. Because if you actually watch the original series, it's hilarious.
Yep.
Like those guys are making all kinds of jokes, and sci-fi up until that point's been very, clinical and straightforward, and everybody's so super serious. And it's like, well, that's not humanity.
Right.
Everybody's going to have, because look, if you take Finn, yes, he was a comic relief, but he had a very serious side to him.
Yeah.
And he was going through a lot of torment during that movie. And then, he got like really, which one? I don't know why I'm drawing. Oh, I know I'm drawing a blank because it's almost midnight.
Yep.
What was the one where he just like he started kind of going off, like he was angry about something? You know what I mean? It's like
he's like, why does everybody want to go back to why does everybody want to go back to Jakku? Force Awakens, he was kind of like,
well, that one he was sort of torn and he was doing it. Then the Last Jedi, he was starting to. I know he was more serious on that one too.
Well, yeah, he was really upset because he trusted Benicio del Toro's character.
Yeah.
And he realized like, okay, I'm putting Rose in danger. I mean, even his whole thing, like every time he tries, and that's the thing about him, like every time he's trying to get away from it, like something keeps pulling him back. Whether it's Rey, whether it was Rose, electrocuting him and making him unconscious, and then there was always something. And I think that he started to take responsibility for certain things, especially, and then even by the end of the Last Jedi, when he was like, all right, I'm going to sacrifice myself. Like he's really just trying to like own and try to find his way. I mean, and it's hard because you don't know who you are and that's his story, is because in the very beginning they say, well, what's your name? He's like, I don't have a name. I mean, this man doesn't even have a name. He was a number. And so it's like everybody else has so he had to learn how to be part of humanity himself because he was more so just a part of a group.
Yeah, he had basically lacked individuality.
Yeah. He wasn't allowed to think for himself because the Empire told him what to do. And he doesn't know anything else because they got him when he was a baby. So it was just like...
Yeah. So Ronaldo is like, at least the possibility of seeing Finn again opens, at least in an animated way. Yeah, I think that would be cool. I think, though, that we could get a live action type of thing. Also... Speaking about animated, saw that holiday special trailer. Yes, I did.
Oh, you finally saw it?
Yes.
Man,
I forgot to bring that up to you.
Oh, man.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ronald. I totally forgot to bring that up. Yes. That looks really good, actually. Yeah. Like, it looks hilarious, but, I mean, it actually looks like it's a really cool...
story.
Yeah, it's a story. It's something we never really seen in Star Wars before. I think it's going to be cool. I know it's coming out on... It was Netflix, right?
I think so.
I mean,
it might
be Disney Plus. It's got to be Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But did they give a premiere? Either one of you guys know?
November 17th.
Never mind. Oh, it's coming out soon then.
Yep.
Yeah, look at me finding things out while we're actually doing the show. Okay, so Jason. The Scout Troopers were a different kind of comedy. I'll grant them that. Instead of cracking one-liners like the Marvel movie, the Scout Troopers are just acting natural and making fun of Star Wars tropes. Well, that's a point that we've been making forever, is that was one of the things actually that we did not like about The Last Jedi, was that they were going a little bit too into Marvel humor territory.
I found that more like with Poe than anything.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Poe was more
again,
like that than Finn. Finn is more... Finn is just kind of like... I think, and when you look at... See, the thing is... When you look at Finn's character, once again, I think it's just, if you look at the character of Finn, like I said, he's not really, he's kind of like that socially awkward kid.
Yeah, and that's the thing. See, what you got to look at is the fact that Finn was being natural and everything.
To the character.
To the character, exactly.
Right.
That's the way an awkward character that has no individuality, he's kind of learning You know, it's almost like that droid that learns to be human, like Data. I mean, look at me. I keep bringing up Star Trek in a Star Wars show, but
Or even K2SO.
K2SO, you know, it's kind of like, right. I mean, Finn was actually, his humor, everything was true to his character.
Right.
When Poe started doing some stuff.
Yeah, now Poe, when he's pulling up on the X-Wing, he's like, yeah, I'll hold.
Yeah,
okay, now that's
that was all Marvel humor. And
yeah, that's something like you were just waiting for Tony Stark to come out.
Yeah,
of nowhere.
it doesn't really fit in Star Wars at all. And that was one of the problems that I had with a lot of the jokes that were in The Last Jedi, whereas The Force Awakens felt very Star Wars to me.
Yeah.
All the humor in it felt very Star Wars to me. I mean, I guess you could say that maybe there were certain things that went a little bit, like it was almost Star Wars humor on steroids a little maybe, and I could see where that could take you out of something.
Well, yeah, he was just Poe was just trying to be cocky and.
Well, I mean, even Finn's thing.
But Finn, to me, like I just felt like Finn was just more like, I felt like his was more organic.
Oh yeah,
I think it's just like, okay, you know.
But what I'm saying is, I could see why somebody might, because of the way that it's written. I could see where, because it was more like the original trilogy had truly organic humor.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in The Force Awakens, like when, you know, the whole thing where, you know, he's trying to get BB-8 to, you know, give him the information so he can look good to Rey, and then he's doing the thumbs up, and BB-8 does the lighter thing, which is totally hilarious. And it was Star Wars-ish, but it was sort of like hyper Star Wars-ish.
Yeah, okay, that part, yeah.
And it was more like it was more like a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas the humor in the original trilogy was very situational. It fit whatever the situation is. It wasn't like a comedy routine. And I can see where somebody like Jason, I won't get to, I know he's been commenting, but I'll get to some of them in a second. But I can see where somebody like him, maybe the comic bits and the routine feel to it, might have been a little bit out of place in it.
Yeah.
It's just that the comedy bits were Star Wars humor, but the fact that, you know,
it seemed a little bit more like a rehearse. Like, here's the funny part, as opposed to just like
you almost are waiting for the laugh track to come in.
Right.
You know, and I can see where somebody might get a little bit put off by that, especially because one of the brilliant things about the original trilogy was that Lucas knew how to blend natural comedy and, you know, more of like a real life situation type of a thing and have it be fun. Because remember, his template was Flash Gordon. I mean, this is one of the things that really kills me about people too when they get overly critical about this stuff. It's like, guys, you do remember that one of Lucas's major whole influences was the Flash Gordon 30s serial, which was kind of campy and goofy. And in fact, had Lucas gotten the rights to make Flash Gordon, which is what he was originally trying to do, Star Wars never would have even been made.
Yeah.
It was because he lost the rights and he couldn't make Flash Gordon that he was like, well, if I can't make Flash Gordon, then I will make a movie like Flash Gordon. And that's when he came up with this whole story that we all pretty much worship at the feet of.
Yeah.
But again, even though I'm saying all this stuff, I can understand, and this is, again, where the sequel trilogy doesn't always... It's like, even when it gets some things right, sometimes it gets it right, but in a wrong way. And I could see where that, I mean, for me, I was fine with it. It was still within the realm of Star Wars. Even though it wasn't quite as natural as like the original trilogy, I was just glad to have some life, man. I mean, look, I like the prequels a lot. I even love some of them. But those things were more wooden than a log cabin. You know, the acting was really stiff. I mean, even the humor was kind of stiff. I mean, I liked it. Yeah. We all know how I feel about the white pants.
Yes, me too.
But, you know.
Very well documented.
So I think what a lot of fans were reacting to, particularly when The Force Awakens came out, and this is why I think a lot of us overlooked a lot of things, is because it was just nice to see a really, I guess, natural
Star Wars
kind of thing that felt
it
had life.
It felt like the original, because see, the problem was with the prequels, although George was trying to advance the technology, we always talk
Green
about
screen.
Yeah, exactly. It looked like everything was. You could tell everything was on green screen. Versus, the sequel was like, okay, now we're using real places again. We're in that. It gave you the original trilogy vibe and look.
Oh, you had to feel bad for those guys. They're in like this giant, huge sound stage that's nothing but green. And then some guy's got something on a stick, and it's like, okay, now you got to pretend like there's this just insane world and all these characters that you're supposed to be talking to. And, as
Right.
an actor, this is kind of new to actors in general, not just these particular actors, but
Yeah,
like you said, this
green
is
screen work was just really starting to
at least to that degree.
to that degree, right?
To that degree, where you're literally the only organic thing in that room.
Mhm.
And it's like you're expected to act and react and as if you have, a bunch of people. And I think that this is why The Mandalorian is working so well right now, because they actually have people, and it's LED walls and, using the Unreal Engine, and you get the whole parallax thing going, and it's like you're getting the benefit of having these artificial environments, but you're interacting with things.
Right.
Whereas back during the prequel era, it's just kind of like, yeah, you're the only guy. All right, action, and you're having to pretend,
Right.
which is cool. But I think that going back to the practical sets, going back to a lot of the practical effects and some of the things felt good. But I will say, by the same token, that even though I don't particularly feel this way, I can understand and recognize why somebody might have been taken out of the experience a little bit with some of the humor that went on, because they felt more like comedy routines than organically placed humor.
Gotcha.
And like you said, scripted,
Mm-hmm.
But it was overall, I think it's good though that, Boyega had this clearing of the air, and that maybe we can look forward to some more stuff, because I was really hoping that they would eventually expand on the whole Finn storyline.
Oh yeah, I think that
At some point.
Jason says, I guess I just see humor differently, and then Ronaldo also says, I forgive Lucasfilm and Disney if they finally turn Finn into a Jedi.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that.
About him being a Jedi?
Yeah, because on one hand, it's one of those things where I could go either way on it. Like, I wouldn't hate it, but it's just kind of like, does everybody I get the way that the whole Force thing worked before, is that everybody has, and, heaven knows we've actually gone ad nauseum on our discussion of the Force. But the idea is, yeah, it's accessible to everybody, and Jedi are the ones that,
Yeah, just harness it.
that harness it and stuff like that. And it'd be no different than a bunch of people wanting to go into the military. I mean, it's not out of the question. I mean, it's people understand that.
Mhm.
But from a storytelling perspective, it would just be nice to keep some people or I think it would be more compelling if they were Force sensitive without becoming a Jedi. I think that there's some stories that you could tell there. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what if you're Force sensitive, but you don't necessarily want to go down the Jedi path? You know what I mean? It's like you could do some really cool stuff with that.
That's true.
But I wouldn't hate it. So, hopefully we'll see. And they did open that door.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, as usual, what'd you guys think? Do you are you happy to see John Boyega kind of happy to be part of the family again, or
Mending the fences?
yeah, or have you had enough of Finn and don't want to see it? Let us know in the comments section. What's next?
Next we have. We're actually going to talk about the
villains of the High Republic. And there's a gang of them too. It's funny because we brought this up before when we were talking about the different factions, right? Like, well, we were talking about the Padawans. We talked about the Jedi. Then we talked about like the overall story of the High Republic. And I remember one of the things that we kept saying was, I can't wait to see who these guys are supposed to fight, because if the Sith aren't around, then, who's left to fight? And it's really interesting to me because they actually came up with some really cool villains, in my opinion. There's the Neil, or however you say it. I don't even know. We'll have to wait till somebody pronounces it. It's so funny too, because every time they come out with these things like the Nogri or the Yuuzhan Vong, you kind of look at it and you're like, I don't even know how to say this. But they got those. They got
let's see, they got the Dringer.
who are the ones that are like the Viking ones?
Well, the Dringer is like some weird, like Krayt Dragon.
Yeah, they got some guys. Like, you talk about being freaked out about seeing the little ant dude in the Mandalorian that we saw today. Ooh, there's some of these villains where I'm like, even the way they look is kind of freaky,
So the Neil or the Nile or whatever, they're like the Vikings.
Okay, those are the guys that are like the Vikings.
Yeah.
Not the Minnesota Vikings for all you football fans out there.
Yes. Yet another villain the Lions can't beat. And then you have
They play them this Friday or Sunday, don't they?
They do.
No, we know how that's gonna go.
Yep. Marching Row. That's the other one.
Thought you were like talking to me in some other language.
No,
Marching Row to you too.
Yes. It's not frog. Let's see.
Yeah, so, it's so funny, man. I didn't even think about it. Because we were so late going on and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I should have hooked up my other computer so I could have just shown the pictures of some of these guys, like what I've been trying to do. But you could see who are the ones that I have right now pictured in our little graphic. Jason's from Minnesota. You a football fan, Jason?
No, I'm not a big football fan though.
That's probably good. Actually, to be honest, and you know this to be true, the Vikings are actually one of my favorite football teams.
Yes, it is.
If not my favorite. So
outside of the Cowboys.
Outside of the Cowboys. Nice. Nice. I see what you did there. No, I mean, it's like the Vikings are cool, man. I've always loved that team. And, it's kind of weird when they play the Lions. It's like I'm not really sure who I should be rooting for.
Yeah, that's how I felt about my Ravens.
Yeah, are they still your favorite?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
And they're winning.
But the Ravens and the Vikings are not fighting the High Republic.
No, they're not. But I'll tell you who.
Aha.
So, we have some great looking villains that will be accompanying our Jedis and Padawans in the High Republic. So here we go.
Writing a book report or something, or you're like about that. Totally sounds like the intro, like when you're in school and you go up, especially elementary school. Yeah, you're going up in front of the class, like today. I mean, it's just that was kind of
classic.
Yeah.
So the Nile or the Heel are brutal, savage marauders based in the Outer Rim. They're the stuff of nightmares, able to appear anywhere almost at will. They use bizarre, intimidating tactics, chemical weapons, poison, anything that might kill you, they'll use. Wow. Now
the thing is, man, who are those guys in the Outer Rim that Thrawn and the Chiss were fighting? The name escapes me. The Grisk. Grisk, yeah, that's it. So it makes you wonder, again, it's kind of like same sort of region, you know what I mean? It's like, it just makes you wonder, like, okay, where do they fall in this?
Okay. Yeah, that could happen. Let's see. Unlike the monstrous Dringer, the Nile plot and have a power structure, which might just make them even more terrifying in the end. They are organized into three main divisions called Tempest, each with its own captain who wields total control. They're frightening in a way that feels great for Star Wars, in part because of their code. If you can call it that, it's so simple. The Nile take what they want. If you stand in their way, they will kill you and everyone you love. But even Chaos agents have goals, and then Neo's plans run directly through the Republic and through the Jedi Order. So they kind of remind me of the Knights of Ren. That's what kind of the vibe they give me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's exactly, as you were reading that, I'm sitting there thinking that's kind of like the Knights of Ren to me.
And then one of the faces of them is...
Jason's like, they could teleport?
That's what I was thinking too. Like, oh, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, I mean, And then Ronaldo's asking, does Marchion Ro have some parts similar to Vader's suit? This is almost like the clear your mind thing.
I know, right? Well, I'm getting to him, actually. Marchion Ro, who promises to be a great addition to the Star Wars tapestry of villains we love to hate. Marchion Ro holds an important post within the greater Nihil organization. He is the eye of the Nihil, as was his father before him. He doesn't give the orders. That's up to the Tempest runners. But in a very real way, everything revolves around him. The things that make the Nihil more than a bunch of Outer Rim raiders all come from Marchion. He is also in every sense a bad guy. And it's been fantastic building someone around which focuses the dark elements of our High Republic story.
Oh, Connor's with us. So he's asking, could we see the inspiration of the Jedi Sentinel because of these same villains? I could sort of see that. I think that we are going to see a lot more of these orders and then within the Jedi Order that sounds kind of weird, but it's a lot of these because you have the Sentinel, you have the Guardians, you have like all these various different factions within the Jedi Order. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that maybe we can start to see a little bit of this now in the High Republic era. Because it seems like this would be around the time that you would have that.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I could totally see, that being the case.
Yeah, these guys kind of look like the dudes who were hanging out with Saw Gerrera and.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing that it reminded me of too, is a lot of that influence, and it makes me wonder, like okay,
that mercenary.
Yeah, I mean, are we gonna get some of this stuff or?
Yeah, like between like those guys and Knights of Ren, that's kind of what these guys remind me of.
Yeah, and they have a little bit of the order like the Yuuzhan Vong do to me. Like there's a little bit of that hierarchy. Because that's what I thought was actually really cool about that particular group is that you got like you actually
a structure system.
Yeah, like there was this whole structure, and they took the time, each of the authors, to let you know this, but not in a crazy. I mean, there were some guides, I think, in the beginning of the book that gave you a little bit of the structure, but a lot of times they just gave it to you within story, which is really cool. Because, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I haven't read the Lord of the Rings books. Because they literally have part of those books that are written completely in Elvish, like for chapters. And they actually have an Elvish dictionary.
Right.
And I'm like, do you really think that I'm going to sit there and read all this stuff and actually go and look up what they're saying? I mean, I admire see what they should have done.
It's like that Cleon.
Yeah.
Like dictionary.
But see, what I would have done if I were Tolkien, which, it's probably like, okay, whatever. But I would have like had the Elvish and then just put the English translation underneath it. I mean, why are you making people do all that work? I mean, who knows? Maybe by now that's what they do. I don't know. But... they've got entire like bibliographies. They've got, family, all this lineage. So, I mean, there's just like, it's like homework. You almost have to have a Lord of the Rings workbook to then go back and read the books. And I would love to read the books. I've been wanting to since I was a kid, actually. But I'm me, I'm an avid reader, but it was kind of like, dude, there's no way in the world
I'm going through all this
that I'm going to go through all those. And it's not like these things are 300-page books.
No, they're like 1,000-page books.
Craziness. Who else we got?
That's it.
That was it?
Mm-hmm.
So how many different guys have we got? As you could tell, I was paying attention.
Well, we have the Drengar monster, and then we have the Nihil, but then, you got the... I almost called him Macchio, like Ralph Macchio. Marchion Ro. He's kind of like one of the main guys who kind of like leads him.
Okay, so now that you've got somewhat of a picture of these villains, what do you think that tells us about the High Republic? Because usually you could tell a lot about, whatever the story is or whatever through its villains or maybe sometimes through its heroes, but
Yeah, I think. I mean, like I said, I don't know so much of their abilities, but it sounds like they can teleport, which I can understand how that could be a bit of a problem because if you can just pop up on people like almost anywhere, I can see how that could pose a problem, especially because now you got to wonder, can the Jedi still sense that?
well, it goes back to, and I mean, I hate to keep hammering these Star Trek references, but it reminds me of Q.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's one of those things that I wonder how problematic this could be in the
Especially
Star Wars universe.
Well, especially if you got a bunch of people who can do it. It's like now you're popping up, or if you coordinate some weird attack, like, okay, we're going to pop up in the Jedi Temple, just out of nowhere. You're having a Tuesday night meeting, and next thing you know, you got the Neil just standing around like, yep, we're going to take you guys out.
Well, there's got to be some limitations behind it. I mean,
Well,
it's not like, there has to be something because otherwise, yeah, like you said, like an entire army could just teleport, like you're sleeping in your bunks or whatever it is, or, you're just having like your little Wednesday night meeting, like you said, and,
Exactly. So, I mean, there might be some limitations. We don't know yet, but
there almost has to be. See, the problem is, and this is where you get into a lot of issues when you're doing any kind of a sci-fi fantasy, anything, comic book stuff, anything like that, is that whenever you create these superhuman or super powerful type beings, you almost always have to put some sort of limitation on them because otherwise the story, the dramatic tension, all that stuff is gone. That's the reason why Superman has kryptonite, and it's like, till of course they came out, and that was a funny thing too about Superman because, at first it was very simple. Then they came out with like, okay,
all the different color kryptonite.
Yeah, well, I mean, it became like Skittles after
Starburst.
Blue
and red kryptonite and
right,
orange
but then it
kryptonite.
even goes beyond that. It started becoming like fuchsia and like goldenrod, and it's like the Crayola thing, but it's kryptonite. It's kind of like, okay, we got to slow this down, like, because I remember, obviously blue kryptonite healed them. There's one that like killed him instantly. I think that was like white or gold or something. Ronaldo says, I think they are interesting and I like the idea of seeing a new type of villain in Star Wars. Yeah, me too. And we know that at some point we will see a force-sensitive antagonist. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that it would be really... It would be almost unthinkable that there would not be some sort of a force sensitive. But here's the thing that I would think would be interesting.
Well, even if they're not force sensitive, you gotta, on the villain side, you have to wonder how do they contend with the force, especially if you're going against the Jedi Order. That you're going through the most powerful Jedi at that point.
Yeah, because they're pretty much in their prime at this point.
Yeah.
And so either you've got something. What would be interesting to me, though, and this is something that I don't think we've ever seen in Star Wars, but let me just get to Jason really quick here. There better be some limitations and some limited explanations. Yeah, I totally agree. And this goes into that's why I want to get to this. This goes into my point, is that what if instead of them doing like a light side, dark side thing, what if you had these guys kind of being like light side users too, but opposing the Jedi? That doesn't necessarily mean they're good guys. Again, we would have to go into like, how would the Force determine that? And it's almost like I think one of the big things that we talked about was light side versus dark side is really more the intent.
Yeah, because I'm
so it's an evil intent, and it's a dark side type of a thing. But I mean,
because I'm gonna say with their definition, they already said like they use poison to kill. I mean, like they're they're marauders basically.
But I'm not talking about those guys though.
Oh, you're just talking about if there's
because Ronaldo brought up the fact of what's the chance of them bringing up a force sensitive antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
So we know these guys, at least to the knowledge. Now they could be force sensitive. We don't know that yet because they haven't put that in there. I mean, right now we can assume they're not because they haven't said anything about it, but that could be something that they're holding back for the actual books to come out.
Right.
But what if What I'm saying is, what if they have an antagonist who is opposing the Jedi, but he's not necessarily bad? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like
two factions that think they're
right.
It's almost kind of like if you had Dr. King versus Malcolm X. Like they both are fighting the same thing, but they have different methods of going about doing it. So
achieving good.
For achieving a good purpose, like they want people to be peaceful and have this, but they just have two different methods about going. Or
I'll give you a Star Wars example: the Resistance versus a New Republic.
Well,
because remember, that's why Leia and that group broke off from the New Republic. They're still kind of fighting for the New Republic, but they're somewhat seceded because they thought that Leia was somewhat of a warmonger, and she was saying like, no, you guys don't understand. And they kind of had differences of opinion and ideology. So they're fighting for the same thing. Mm-hmm. They're fighting for the good of the New Republic, but they're doing it independently. Mm-hmm. So in a way and I understand what you're probably alluding to. It's like, yeah, but they're not actually going against each other, though. It's not like a Resistance person is going against a New Republic person, but kind of.
Yeah, in a way they are.
In a way they are.
I mean, yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you can have, or you can even look at it for the same, even though, like, looking at our country right now, like Democrat, Republican, it's like they both want what's best for the country, and they think this is
right, and they just have like different ideologies
on how to
ways of achieving it and all that stuff, right?
And so, like, you can understand, like, well, if the Jedi are like the governing rule, you can have another group that says, well, who says that you should be this rule?
But here's the thing: are the Jedi even the governing rule, though? I mean, there's got to be like a
you have a
High Republic government.
No, yeah. What I'm saying is, but the Republic always used the Jedi as more so
like
as
peacekeepers.
Peacekeepers. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, well, who's to say that? Why should you be the peacekeepers? Why can't we be peacekeepers? It's like, what makes you?
That would be hilarious if two factions go to war because they want to be peacekeepers.
I know. And that's what would make
that would actually be kind of cool.
But that's what I'm saying. But that's where I was going with your point, though. It's like, well, if you're going to be light side,
sure.
and not put your, saying like to be a light side user, but still an antagonist, that would be it.
Well, you would almost have to, because that's it is. I mean, even as soon as I said it, I'm kind of like, well, all right, that's a little bit of a slippery slope. I mean, this is, how do you achieve that? But that is a good way of achieving it, is that you are actually fighting for the good. Like, both sides are fighting for the good, but they're kind of doing this. Jason, instead of making a group of Force sensitives, they should make a group that has some Force sensitives. The Force sensitives would be the leaders, and the others would be like the common people. Yeah, I can see that. It would I think it really depends on how they want to do this, and it also depends on whether or not this is a complete list of the villains or not.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would rather what I think will be better, or would be more interesting to me, at least for me, would be like, how like MacGyver kind of does faction stuff to combat people because they had the numbers, but he had the skill.
Right.
So, it's like, I think that would be cool in that regard. So, like, you have the Jedi who just naturally have this ability to use the Force, and they could, they've harnessed it and mastered it. But then you might have people who could use technologies, shall we say, to combat the Force. Like, they can create things to almost kind of like how, like, the clones did, like, those droid poppers, where they would roll them up, and then it was like, okay, it would short circuit them out or something like that. So if you came up with stuff that would like work against Jedi, or like, okay, like, oh, I'm gonna throw this thing at you, and it's like it inhibits your, neural pathways or something, so you can't use the Force for a few minutes or something like that. I can kick the crap out of you. You know what I'm saying? Or you come up with different things to kind of combat
Right.
that, and I
Right.
think that would give because it's now the Jedi just don't
Well,
have
it
an
becomes
easy...
a Batman versus Superman kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's sort of like, okay, I mean,
Exactly.
I can't match you in power, but I can outthink
Exactly.
and I can come up with things that can counteract your various powers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be that would be really inventive because we know that Star Wars is very tech heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Why not have like a Force version of the ion cannon that essentially neutralizes maybe it disrupts the midi-chlorians or something. And hey, that's a nifty way you could bring the midi-chlorians back in.
Mm-hmm.
And say, hey, it disrupts them or, it does something to you.
Yep.
Almost like a Force stun grenade kind
like
of thing.
Scrambler or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Something that would do that. And that would be interesting because, again, that's something we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder because we know that this thing is going to go for, like over books and then it's going to cross into comics and it's going to do stuff. They have a big story and a big, really more like a story arc. And then I think you're going to have these individual stories in that.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, how broad that's going to be. Like, are they giving us these few villains that maybe this is covering the arc, but when you start to get into the individual stuff, are we going to maybe see something like somebody that counteracts the Force with tech? Mm-hmm. The other thing is, it would be interesting to see where is tech at this point.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was a couple hundred years before the Phantom Menace. We see a little bit of the tech and everything that they had in the Old Republic, although I don't know exactly how much. We know Revan's canon. We know some of the Knights of the Old Republic stuff has been soft canonized,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we don't exactly know how much of that, so we can't really just say, okay, that world is going to be, this actually represents what the Old Republic is like. I think that that's a story that Disney is going to likely tell in future either books or movies or TV shows or whatever. But it would be interesting, though, to see where the whole technology thing is during the High Republic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's because it's older enough, so you're okay, well, what's around at that time? And is it still really, advanced, or is this kind of like the layover?
Yeah,
I mean, the go between, Phantom Menace and the Old Republic,
well, it's almost like at what point in the Star Wars universe are they more antiquated, like pre-tech, you know? Because it's kind of like, you even look at the tech in the Old Republic, dude, it would be to us, it's magical, I mean,
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's still, you could definitely tell it's older than, say A New Hope or something, but let's see what Jason says here.
I would hate that. Short-circuiting magic with tech seems wrong. But also, if this technology existed, why do people forget it? I mean, I think that could be. It's no different than, for example, police scanners, right? You can buy them and put them in your car so you can identify where police are coming. But technically, they're illegal.
Yeah.
So it's you could still you can do something where it's okay, this kind of it's kind of like stuff that you would find on the black market, and these are the kind of guys that would have that type of stuff. Jason also says interrupting someone's connection to the Force seems wrong to me. Well, that's the idea. I think that's if you look at that episode of what's it, the Clone Wars, where they're draining that one witch was draining the life force out of people. I mean, that's,
oh yeah, that's totally.
Yeah, I mean, she was trying to, and they were siphoning off that one council or something like that of all their force because they were trying to duplicate.
Well,
the force.
Then you got the Yuuzhan Vong, who's completely impervious to the Force, even though they're in the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Ysalamiri, which were creatures that created a force
field,
bubble,
yeah.
which is nothing more than that's the natural version of the tech you're talking about.
Exactly.
I mean, all you could do is make
those
those things canon and then say, okay, we're taking the whatever venom or whatever from these things, and
mm-hmm.
fashioning it into some sort of a
weapon.
Weapon.
We just weaponize it.
Yeah, we're weaponizing it. So I mean, it's not like it hasn't been introduced before. And of course, the idea of tech versus magic. I mean, I would say that's really something that you see in a lot of fantasy films.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like
People are
the great
counteracting.
The great one you said was like Batman and Superman. That's the best one.
Batman versus Superman. A lot of Lord of the Rings type stuff is, definitely where they're, they can't. Now, naturally, magic pretty much always like wins basically, but if you think about what Star Wars is,
I mean,
Star Wars is every bit as much technological as it is magical in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, like even in Return of the Jedi, I mean, you got these little pint-sized teddy bears who got these primitive sticks and stones, but yet they're beating.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I don't know if everybody thinks that that's cool. But I will do this, and this will totally make your point. Is that the original version of that was supposed to be Wookiees?
Oh no, right?
Wookiees would have made more sense.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it would have done the whole thing that Lucas himself. It was an allegorical thing. It was allegorical to Vietnam, and it was the idea that
this is our home planet.
The natural.
You're in our habitat, basically.
Well, it's not even that. It's more like the natural, like, sort of primitive weapons can overcome the high technology. So all we're introducing is the high technology could even overcome the Force if you weaponize it in a certain way.
Or it's not even the fact that it overcomes it, but it just levels the playing field.
Or counteracts it.
Yeah, it levels the playing field. It's just like it's giving me a chance to beat you.
Yeah, which would go into the Batman versus Superman.
Exactly.
Now, here's where, though, I am going to swing towards Jason's point a little bit. Why would they forget it?
Well, it's not, like I said, it's not the fact they forget it. It's just that, one, like I said, if they were able to do it, it could have been outlawed. It could have been banned. They could have seized whatever those things that they could have. I mean, like,
right. And Jason even says, like, tech shouldn't directly counter magic. It should overpower or get around it. Well, I think that's really all we're really talking about. I mean, that's kind of semantics on that one. I mean, I understand the distinction between the two, but yeah. I mean, you could split hairs like that. You could say that really what we're talking about is really more get around it. Because, I mean, if you really think about it, Batman's just getting around Superman's powers by temporarily neutralizing. That's really, if you wanted to put a buzzword to it, that's what we're talking about. Neutralizing it temporarily.
Yeah.
Ronaldo says, speaking of technology in this age, there's a Jedi in a preview who is missing an arm and does not have a prosthetic. That may indicate that the technology is not very developed. That's a good point. It does make me wonder about that. In fact, I ended up seeing that. Now, we don't know why that's the case yet. Maybe this person doesn't like, maybe the technology creeps them out. Or, I mean, more realistically, I honestly think that this is kind of like an inclusive, we're going to give like an amputee kind of hero. So people, I mean, it sounds ridiculous,
right?
but I mean,
it's.
I honestly think that that's, you got a little boy that's missing an arm, and now there's a Star Wars hero that's missing an arm or whatever. It's
kids who may be amputees can relate to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that that's really, but I mean, since we're dealing with like in-universe discussions, that is a good point.
And Jason says, I doubt the Hutts will let the Republic take that kind of tech away from them. Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, there's sometimes where you can't. I mean, like I said, it just all depends on how you tell the story. I mean, if you craft a story in such a way, I mean, yeah, you can always find loopholes for anything, just about if you want to.
Yeah, but we've had to do it for years, thanks to a lot of the big loopholes that Lucas makes.
Yeah, but I mean,
that's where Lucas himself. One of the things that always drove George Lucas nuts, and I could see it, because you see this in a lot of the fandom. George has always been trying to tell us Star Wars is broad strokes.
Mm-hmm.
And fantasy is broad strokes. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to go into the minute details of everything. But a lot of times what happens in Star Wars fandom in particular, because they do give us a lot of details, is that the sci-fi mentality takes over. Mm-hmm. And now you start wanting to know why. Well, how does this work? And why is this working that way? And if this, then why not that? And all this other stuff.
All right.
Where at the end of the day, it's broad strokes. I
I mean, because if that
Just because it does,
yeah, it's just
it's
like
storytelling.
I mean, if that's the case, like we've always said, like okay, well, you know, if Palpatine, I mean, like it wouldn't make us so much of a good story. I mean, like the Jedi have this amazing power, especially like the Jedi Council. Oh yeah, man, get a group of those guys together, they'll wipe out everybody with just like one wave of their hands. I mean, because
Oh, for crying out loud, we could go on forever. Why didn't Qui-Gon sense the big fish? And you know what I mean? It's like,
you have
why,
to
why did they use some like crazy, use of the Force in one situation, but when it would actually help them more or be equally relevant, why don't they use it in another situation?
Right.
There's inconsistencies there all the time because, again, Star Wars is broad strokes.
Yeah, it's about the
not
storytelling.
meant to go under a microscope and actually just like sit there and analyze it to death, even though that's kind of what we do on this show. But even on this show, a lot of times we're dealing with the broad philosophies of things, or we're dealing with like overall character arcs or something like that. But I mean, I will admit, look, I'm guilty of it too, right? I'm the guy that wants to know what they talked about during the dinner in The Empire Strikes Back. I'm sure if I asked Lucas that, he'd probably would think I'm mental. Like, why? It's like, what's your problem, man? But I mean, again, when you're a fan, it's almost like when you love something like the way, at least the four of us, because we know that, who knows how many people are watching. We know Ronaldo and Jason are watching. We know Connor was there probably listening or whatever. When you're a Star Wars fan like us, it's almost like the more that they give you, the more you want to know. And you want it to make sense in your head. And that's one of the things that's really great about everybody is the fact that one of the things I love about doing the show, actually, especially once we started being able to interact with other Star Wars fans directly, is the fact that it's so cool because I can't count the number of times, like Jason, for instance, will in the comment section, not even always in the chats, he'll leave a comment and he'll have like a particular, like a view or something of something in one of the movies or whatever. And it's like, wow, I never actually looked at it that way, or maybe, you're talking about two people fighting in a duel, and it's like, well, I think this person would win. And then somebody else goes, well, but what if this were the situation? And you go, well, maybe in that situation it would work. Yeah. This is great. Jason's like, the best explanation for most of those cases is force walls and specialization.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what else? A lot of times, too, and this is where it gets into it, it's almost like on the Force side of it, it's kind of like, well, the Force wills it, or, it's just, and again, sometimes it's more compelling in a storytelling thing to not explain it.
Yeah, it's like why Michael Myers kills. It's like because he's just pure evil.
Well, and that's a good point, too. Like John Carpenter originally did not want to make any Halloween sequels. His idea, actually, which kind of started with Halloween 3, and because I think it would have succeeded, except the fact that they didn't really tell everybody at the time. I remember this, too. I was like 11 years old. No, I was actually 12 because it came out in October, I think, or August. They didn't tell anybody that Michael Myers wasn't going to be in it. That's kind of a bad thing to do when you call something Halloween 3. But the idea was it was supposed to be almost like an anthology. Like every Halloween, they were going to release a movie that was like Halloween themed. Like a different Halloween-based horror film, basically. And the original title of Halloween was The Babysitter Murders. Wasn't even supposed to take place on Halloween. It was like either Irwin Yablans or Yablans. Or it was like one of the producers, maybe it was Mustafa Akkad, I don't remember which one it was, but somebody had the idea of, hey, why don't you have it take place on Halloween and call it Halloween? And, Carpenter liked the idea, so he sort of incorporated that. But, yeah, Michael Myers had no motive in the original thing. That was the thing that was scary. It was kind of like there was no motive. You didn't know why he was killing these people. And then, of course, they forced him to make the sequel, and it's like, well, all right. now he had to come up with the whole sister thing, but it's kind of like it was actually kind of freakier when you really didn't know.
Mhm.
But again, there's a lot of us that are kind of like, yeah, but there's got to be a reason. Why
Mhm.
is he killing all these people? Why is he killing them and not going like next door? That's one of the things I actually appreciated about the 2018 one. I mean, he just went down the block, man, just started going in every house and just,
Yep. Letting everybody have it.
letting everybody have it, like indiscriminately. And I'm like, all right, now that's what I'm talking about. Not that I glorify violence, kids, but I mean, hey, Halloween is like my favorite horror film of all time, and that's part of the reason why. I mean, there's many reasons why. I could probably do a whole show on just that. And this is where I can kind of make that plug for my
Right.
my horror themed Star Wars movie. But it's a storytelling thing, and everybody's going to be different in the sense of how much story do they want, right? And at what point do you go, it's broad strokes, and then at what point do you say, no, you know what? I'm going to need a little bit of explanation on that. Jason says the fear of unknown is behind almost every other fear. Absolutely. And I think that that's the reason why the original Halloween is as scary as it is.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is that you have to. You hear people say it all the time as it pertains to like leave the audience wanting more, or don't give it all to them at once. Let their imagination wander, and I think that's part of the thing too. You have to allow the grace for that. You have to allow grace for just letting your mind wander. What could have been, or what could, and it's like, well, are we going to get that answer? Are you not? And that's the thing. Everything isn't owed to you, and I think that's one of the things that we as fans have to understand. Like everything isn't going to be. We're not entitled to know everything as much as we want to, but that's why we were fans to begin with, because we weren't like, if you really think about, like, everything wasn't given to us at one point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also to add to that, sometimes, a lot of times directors want your own imagination to take over.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Not show everything,
Everything,
like
yeah.
you said. This is one of the reasons why I think we love to read so much, is because you're not now stuck on a director's vision. Sure, there is an author that's there that's guiding you through the process. But look, I mean, I could read a page where they describe a scene, and you're going to picture it differently from me. Now, granted, we get the facts of the scene and we're talking about it or whatever. Like, oh, remember in Master and Apprentice when, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon did this. But when we're reading it, the visuals that we're seeing in our head and the way that we're interpreting it, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think that that's part of what a good director does in a film, is that they will take a particular scene or whatever, or in the case of a film, it's like a collection of scenes in essence. And what they will do is they will give you like the basic thing, and then they will allow your imagination to take over. So it's beyond just the visuals. That's what a good director will do. This is why Carpenter, and then of course Alfred Hitchcock was a master of this sort of thing. Ronaldo, this is actually a good one. He says, what about a scary Star Wars movie with Mr. Bones?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would rock, actually. Because honestly, Mr. Bones was one of the characters that he kind of creeped me out. And when you're, a lot of times when you're reading and stuff like that, you're not necessarily, even when things are intended to be kind of freaky, it doesn't always hit you that way.
Right.
But he actually hit me that way. And he was like a droid. He was like a reprogrammed battle droid. Well, that's what they were, right? The Roger ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was insane. Another one was the 3PO. There was kind of like the protocol droid that Darth Vader was running around with in the Darth Vader comics. He was like a homicidal maniac. But what about you guys? You know, I mean, you're hearing all this stuff, but as it pertains to the High Republic, you know, what are you guys thinking? Do you like this set of villains? Do you maybe wish they had actually come up with more? What are your thoughts? All right, you ready? If I can stop coughing.
Right.
All right, here we go. Clear your mind. All right, what do we got?
First question comes from Monty Coleman. And his question is, what do you think the odds are that we will see the High Republic in live form?
Oh, I think it's good. I think we're actually going to see the High Republic in live action.
Yeah, I think at some point too.
I don't necessarily think that it's going to be like right away. You know, like I don't think it's going to be like, oh, a couple books are out and boom, look, a High Republic movie or TV show.
No, but I think it's this is set up. I think because they've been dibbling and dabbling. I think talking about going backwards, you know, in that time space. Even Kathleen Kennedy hinted it towards it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you had Benioff and Weiss, you know, was scheduled to do something, but they dropped out. But I think, you know, that's a area where, I mean, it's the area that makes the most sense right now until you can figure out how to continue past Episode 9 or Rise of Skywalker.
Right. And then Jason's like, I will reserve judgment for when the books are released.
Right. I understand.
No, that's a good point. Because we're speculating based on just what we know right now or whatever, but it's like we don't really know where this stuff is going yet.
Yeah, I mean, if the books flop or people aren't vibing with the books or anything, then there'd be no point of making a High Republic, you know, thing. So,
yeah, well, that's a good point too. They got to wait and see how the public reacts to it. I mean, I would say it's really good because right now the public's excited about it.
mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll have to check that out. We'll have to see. I do think this is kind of like a final thought on this question that it's not going to be for a while. I think they really need to establish the world. They need to do a little bit of world building before they actually start.
Yeah, creating movies.
But again, it's kind of like in Jason is pretty much falling right into that. Like, well, I'm going to wait and see what the books are like. Well, it's like, I think that's what a lot of us are thinking too, because like you said, man, it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be any good or not. Or maybe they're good, but maybe it's just something that doesn't interest me.
Or it doesn't translate, may not translate well into film.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, too. I mean, if this thing was actually done for books and comics and all that, I think that they can translate it into film eventually. But like you said, what it might be is they might have to, you know, like tweak it or condense it or do something. Like adapt it, yeah. All right, who's next on the chopping block?
It's Julie Hepley. She asked, do you think that was Rey's actual mother at the end of Rise of Skywalker?
No. Man, I hope not. Once again, one thing that, and again, I mean, I'm sure if the writers were watching this, it'd be like, take it easy, man. She wasn't, you know, but there is a tendency, and it is at the fault of sometimes the writers or whatever, is that everybody has to be related to everybody.
Well, I mean, I get how it would be kind of, because, you know, she did have those visions of her mother and, you know, her parents and whatnot. And she always felt like her parents left her. And so it's like, okay, well, if she was just wandering around the desert, you know, about to bury the whole lightsaber thing. And then she was like, oh, well, you know, who are you? And she was like, I'm Rey, you know, Skywalker. And of course, she's by the Skywalker home. So, but it could have been like, maybe like, all right, you know, maybe the woman might have recognized, like, man, that looks a lot like that could be my child. Because remember, she left her. She never saw what Rey looked like when she got older. Well, so maybe it was, you know.
Like Jason says here, I doubt it. Her parents are supposed to be dead.
Well, that's what Palpatine said. But, you know, the Sith lie.
No, yeah, that's true. But here's the other thing, too. Do you realize the amount of coincidences, which I know is not unprecedented in Star Wars, but that would have to happen that she just happens to be coming, I mean, it would be like,
Yeah.
really? And
Well, because because the funny thing is like, I guess what would make it kind of like full circles because the whole time she's been looking for her parents or
don't get
waiting
me
for her
wrong.
parents, and then like
it would
she
be
finally,
ironic and hilarious.
she
if that was
finally
the
like
case.
runs into her mom, and then it's just like, but at this point, it doesn't even matter now. Like that's what I'm saying. That would be the irony of it all.
There is. Don't get me wrong. It's poetic.
Yeah,
There
definitely.
is a poetic aspect of that. And it's almost like kind of a tragedy kind of thing. It's almost like you finally find out that. But see, in order for that to work, that would have had to have been revealed.
Yeah.
You would have to reveal it because if you're going to go in that direction.
Yeah,
then,
I mean, you could have did something like, she's like, "Oh, I'm Ray Skywalker," and she'd be like, "Oh, you look like my daughter," or something to that effect, or you look like, or Ray walked off or something like that. And then, her mom was like, "I'm proud of you, Ray," or something like that. And then that would have been like the end, and everybody would have been like, "Whoa, that was the mom," or something like that. Like,
yeah, and I mean, again, that would have been spectacular. And even though not everybody in Star Wars has to be related, you're right. That would have been a really cool.
yeah.
Because what would have been neat about that is the fact that if it's sort of like you're finally meeting your mom, and it doesn't even matter anymore,
And you don't even realize it's
and you
like,
don't even know.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Ronaldo says,
Wait.
Jason says, maybe her mom got confused and came to the wrong desert planet. Ronaldo says, I wish she was Luke's daughter. Well, she was from a certain point of view. And then Jason says, coincidence or fate? If all is as the Force wills it, there's no coincidence, and there will be no such thing as luck.
Right, which all go into pointing out that obviously it isn't. But again, this is one of the things that you and I always love to do, and we like to do on this show, is speculation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fun to do. It wouldn't be practical, but hey, there are ways that I think that when you came up with that, though, we have shown that there are ways that it could work.
Yeah, if that's where they were actually trying to go.
Yeah, if that's where they were trying to go, if that's what they were doing. Because a lot of times, and that's what we do too, we're always saying like, okay, well, how would you do this? Or, this is what might be happening, but if this is happening, how would you do it kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of our early episodes when we were still doing the audio.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when we were like, it was like, how would you direct, was it The Last Jedi? I
think it was The Last Jedi, yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you were the director of The Last Jedi, what would you have done kind of thing? And that was actually a really cool, fun episode to do.
Yeah.
Because what's funny about that is that you don't really think about it. Like, when you actually have to sit there and think about it, you start going, man, this is not easy. Maybe I shouldn't be so hard on...
yeah, you got to make it make sense.
On Ryan, because you start to really... because at first you're really confident. You're like, oh, well, I would do X, Y. And then you start to think, well, wait a minute. If that, then this can't happen. You know what I mean? It's like, You're like, ooh, yeah, this isn't easy. But, again, I think that that's one of the things that's so great about Star Wars is that you can actually plug in different kinds of things like that and make it work because, again, it's broad strokes.
Right.
So you can shift things around. But, I mean, now when she actually said that she was Rey Skywalker, how did you, what's funny is, what would be hilarious is if we actually totally contradicted ourselves on the review. But, I mean, but we could do it like kind of now. Like looking back now, it's been almost a year since the Rise of Skywalker. So how did you feel about the whole big, like, okay, I'm Rey Skywalker thing?
I mean, I thought it was, I guess.
So I remember what you originally said. I mean, it's not entrapment.
That's crazy because I don't even remember, but so.
Well, I remember it because it was actually a really good point. You basically said that, that you wish that she had said I'm Rey Palpatine. because you thought it would have been cooler
If she did
to take that name
and change it to something
change
else.
it into
Right.
something else.
Yeah, that's what I did say that.
Yeah. Yeah, you said that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think because a lot of people, we're always looking at lineage, and everybody, looks at stuff, and a lot of times people based on the past, but it's like you're your own person. You can change, the perception, if you will,
Right, and that's
or create your own narrative.
And what I thought was cool about that was you can actually take that. It's kind of like, here's this name that stood for every evil, horrible thing in the world, and now you could be the one that actually goes and changes it to something good.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
and it technically,
oh, here we go.
if you want to be like,
Let me guess, technical.
right. It never really was a bad name to most people.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it depends.
Like, if you're talking to the Jedi, then yes. However, if you're talking just the general public,
Yeah,
they
but
looked
by the
at him-
time of the Rise of Skywalker, there everybody kind of knew what he was all about.
but they only knew him as the Emperor. They never knew him as Palpatine.
Well, he basically came back and said, "Hey, I'm a Sith Lord, and I'm gonna come back." I'm talking Rise of Skywalker here. That big announcement that everybody got at Fortnite, but we never got at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker.
That's not canon. Listen, fake news. It's that's a whole nother. Anyway, but yeah, I
all
just
of that.
yeah.
HNN.
Yes.
Ronaldo says,
Are Rey and Kylo family from a certain point of view? Weird. They're family in the Force, if you will.
well, and they're kind of like, especially once Kylo actually was redeemed, it was almost like the brother and sister in Jedi.
But you can't do that when you're like kissing them again,
Well, I mean, yeah, but
Now, they could be husband and wife almost.
right.
That it could be like that whole Hitchcock thing, or Hancock, not Hitchcock, Hancock. When they were destined to be with you, but they had to be further apart.
Yeah, I mean, and that could work. I mean, the thing that was kind of cool, and this is also the thing that was bad too, is I think a lot of the fans, one of the problems that they had with Rise of Skywalker, even though most people say, yeah, it was fun, it was cool or whatever, but it's like, there's so many things that they could have done that I think people would have felt was better.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that was it, is that was the movie of missed opportunity.
Yeah, but I think he had to kind of, Ronaldo say Skywalker's kissing people. They shouldn't.
Yeah.
I concur.
Yeah, I don't know. They do seem to get it wrong a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, well, and that's the thing. When he actually went back to being Ben Solo, and again, I cannot stress enough about how cool I actually thought that was. Like, I was the guy that didn't want him to be redeemed, like at all. I was dead set against it. I'm like, no, we got this with Vader. No, we can't. I don't want to see this.
Right.
And then I'm watching the thing going, man, I can't believe how cool this is. I actually want more Ben Solo now.
Right.
Because it was just so cool the way that Adam Driver had played that part.
Mm-hmm.
That I was just like, man, he's actually kind of a cool, good guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
and
you got him for like 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, once again, leave the audience wanting more, right? And I was just like, what would be nice, though, is even if they did he's dead, but it makes me want him now to go back and, hey, let's do some prequel type stuff.
Right.
I mean, I doubt that Adam Driver is going to be interested in doing it, but you could either, maybe do it in like a book form or something, or a comic.
The best way to probably be like animation or something.
Animation. You might be willing to do voice work. I don't know. I mean, right now, I think you got to give everybody a break, because a lot of the people are kind of, Oscar Isaac kind of said that famous, like, well, if I need another house, I'll come back to Star Wars or something. So I think people are kind of burnt out, but especially because there was a lot of backlash. I mean, it was tough to be an actor on the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Because they got a bunch of crap for stuff that probably wasn't their fault.
True.
But
Definitely true.
I don't know. I digress. All right. Well, hey, we actually gave you guys a full-length show today.
Yes, we did.
Full-length. Yep. So even though we got on a little bit late, of course, I guess this doesn't really matter in the rebroadcast, but we got on a little bit late, but we gave you guys a full show anyway. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell notification. We're going to give you guys some more content. You can hit us up at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. By then, I should actually be over this weird cold thing that I have. So we're going to try to be on, like I said. I got a little job thing that I got to do next Friday, but, we should be on at 8. If not, I'm sure Daryl, you'll let him know in the chat or whatever.
Yeah.
But hang on, we'll be on at some point, and then our whole schedule will stabilize a little bit. But, it was fun talking Star Wars with you guys. We're going to have another episode of The Mandalorian. We'll be reviewing that and giving you some spoilers on that. So,
Definitely.
be sure to be with us next week. All right, well, that's going to be it for this week. I am Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.